Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
How good it is to be in a cozy wooden house with a burning fireplace in the freezing winter. When the light in the room is extinguished, the fire, impatiently bouncing on the birch logs, seems like a lighthouse fire, pointing the way to the ships of the stormy sea. When you put a few new fields under it, the stove begins to hum quite a bit, and through the closed furnace door you can hear the crackle of its unburned wood. I looked at the thermometer cheerfully opposite the wooden ones. The temperature in the chamber was steadily rising. The red column had already reached the 15 mark, but it wasn't going to stop, and this despite the fact that it was minus 34 outside. I built this hut 5 years ago. I chose the most remote corner of Belgorodskaya Pusha. I worked all summer alone and finally built what I had dreamed of for a long time. Some women, including my wife, can't understand why I have to go to such a remote place and sit here alone. But that's what it's all about, being alone and away from people. I first offered Adriana to visit my forest hotel, but she flatly refused. The mosquitoes, the cold, the loneliness. Even with me, she preferred the socializing, the girlfriends, the blah, 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 blahs, and the advertising-filled nightlife of the city. I didn't try to change that and philosophically accepted the solitude. My outdoor life is not for my wife. And that was the end of it. The hut stood on the bank of a small river. It was a kind of promontory, which is washed by dark waters on 3 sides. Despite the fact that there were 3 and a bunch of frosts, the river did not freeze completely. And even now in the midst of winter, before me came the sound of a chortle. Georges more often on the stones of water. I twisted the wick of the kerosene lamp, and the house became brighter. I relaxed, catching with all my body the heat developing in the room, leaned against the wall, on which hung a blue pelt. No matter how hard Nikon tries to moss the cracks between the ravings, the house still blows through. So I had to hang a rug on the wall, or like me, a skin, right in the center of this improvised carpet on carefully drawn, so as not to spoil. Hanging on the hook was an old but working from a tabletop 16-gauge shotgun. To be honest, I'm not a hunter. I love the subculture, but I have never killed an animal for pleasure in my life. There have been times in my life when I have had to shoot an animal, but only for self-defense or for sustenance. All the horn skins, and even the wolf skull that hung on the walls in the cabin, I bought from hunters for entourage. I'm not for bones, and I'm a pacifist. And if necessary, I can shoot even a man. But satisfying my ego by killing animals is not my thing. Being an antique dealer, a lot of interesting things pass through my hands, but as a rule, I sell everything. But the stuff that involves hunting sticks to my hands. Not many people know that a lot of hunting culture items are sold at European auctions. I will not say that they are exorbitant prices, but the cost in money equivalent of some artifacts bites. Much of what is now hanging on the walls of my hut, I bought in Europe. Agree that the hunting culture there is many times higher than in our country. I once went hunting in the Berezniki district. A bunch of scowling men with automatic rifles arrived. The hunters drove several boars at them, which they shot as if from a machine gun, then booed the carcasses, discarding the hides. The final is predictable. General drunkenness, specific individuals of the female sex, and a terrible hangover. No romance, no duel with the wild beast, nothing. Killed, skinned, dismembered, got drunk, got lost and drove off. Littered the forest in the process. That's all hunting. Once at the flea market, one intelligent old man was selling an antique hunting rock from Latin, covered with greenish mortgage rock noodles, natural leather. And hanging on laces, I immediately made a stand. An antique, and more importantly, an infrequent item. The seller asked quite a manageable amount for me, and I did not haggle. Bought this hunting artifact. The rock is needed in hunting to set off the hounds of hounds or greyhounds. Its piercing melodic sound can be heard far away in the woods or field. I didn't have a dog, but I hung the horn along with my rifle on my elk skins and hide. I threw on the community tulip I had brought here back in the fall, and I went out before going to bed to breathe the frosty air. It was quiet. The silver moon brightly illuminated the tops of the snow-covered trees, trailing a silvery path to my house. I took a deep breath of the icy cold air and coughed. Frost rubbed my throat. Silence. No animal or bird made a voice. Even the cheeky codforty lurked somewhere. In the afternoon, even in the coldest weather, the forest is full of life. Saps try to pick under the frozen bark. Bugs huddle together in flocks of nettles, and finches feast on birch seeds. Flocks of crows piercingly cut circles over the pines in search of prey. Small forest birds huddle together on bare branches, trying to hide from the cold and predators in the silence. I thought I could hear the tree branches cracking from the frost. I looked at the snow-covered fir trees and realized that winter had finally arrived. Soon the first real frost would come. I admired the sleeping, gloomy forest, but for some reason an uneasiness grew in me that could not be explained suddenly. I felt someone's unkind gaze on me. I even shuddered with apprehension. I looked around. No one was there. Was I imagining things? God forbid. A rogue bear shows up. I don't want it on my head. I'm used to trusting my senses, or should I say instinct. That animal, subconscious sense of impending danger. It's never failed me. Not in war, not in everyday life. So there's something or someone here. The bright light of the full moon seemed to play on my nerves in a shimmering silvery glow, and charcoal on the blackness. The roses that surrounded the hut seemed to faintly wave their branches like hands changing pose. When was I Morgan? Or averted his gaze from them for a moment and crept closer to the house. With some sinister intent known only to them, I began to dream that the trees around me were whispering among themselves, waiting for a signal, after which they would rush at me and do something terrible. Trying not to look scared, I went back into the house. I locked the front door with a heavy steel deadbolt. By the way, the door opened outward, and it was almost impossible to break it down. And at that moment, a chilling howl came from outside. It couldn't have belonged to any animal I knew. I'll be honest, I've seen a lot of things in my life. But now a chill ran down my spine and my hands trembled. I took the gun off the wall, put a cartridge in the chamber, and pointed it at the door. Then I took the sharply sharpened axe off the rack and leaned it against the wall beside me. Gingerly I looked out the small window, but saw only a slice of moonlit snowy woods. My brain played a cruel trick on me, inevitably plunging me into a nightmare world. I would suddenly remember hunters missing without a trace in these parts, and it made me feel even worse. I remembered my grandfather telling me that forest roads become impassable and dangerous in such studio frosts. Only a lucky chance and prayer could save a lonely traveler from the wickedness rampant at this time of year. My hand instinctively stung. A silver talisman in the shape of a spear hung on my chest as well, keeping my fingers on the trigger. I was trying to see something in the small one, and the end of it was peering at the locked door and couldn't decide what to do next. The howling had not resumed, but someone was circling stubbornly around the hut. I could clearly hear the crunch of snow under its paws and the crack of branches breaking. Expectation of danger is much scarier than the danger itself, even if it is deadly, but the visible fear of the unknown. Realizing this, I began to calm down. There was even anger awakened in me. Hell no. Will you take me? I've gotten out of worse. You can't just take me. Suddenly, I wanted to see an unknown enemy. Without an enemy, there is no battle without a battle, no victory. And I ventured warily, listening to the sounds outside the hut. I slowly began to walk toward the door. Well, it was time to gain some certainty, even if it was deadly for me. Holding the rifle by the butt of the neck with my right hand, I pulled back the deadbolt and swung the door open with a kick of my foot. There was no one, only the dark, silent wall of woods that densely surrounded the house and the bone-chilling cold. What was it? An obsession, an unconscious primitive fear of the forest, passed on in the genes through a generation. I went around the hut, but found no one but footprints. I'm not much of a tracker, but I've never seen such big bear-like tracks. They were buried deep in the snow, so they must have belonged to a beast of great size, at least bigger than a bear. What kind of beast was it? I didn't know. No one else had been out at night. But I could smell something cautiously walking around the hut and trying to peer into the small, and the end more like a hospital. I slept badly. I lay half lying down, clutching my rifle and axe to me. Then fell into slumber, then awake. Finally, morning came. I shook my head, trying to chase away the remnants of sleep. What was it? Could I have dreamed it all? I took off my taffet, threw on my tulu, and climbed out of the hut. I looked for my skis. They were where I'd left them, under the canopy, close to the wall. The frost had subsided by morning, but it still clung to my nose and bit my cheeks. The dazzling white winter sun shone in the sky. We had to get out of here and go home. But to do that, I had to walk about 10 kilometers to an abandoned trophy factory. There I left the car. There was no way to drive it to the hut. I went back to the house, filled the stove almost to the point of burning, and began to pack. I hid the rifle in a hiding place from daredevils. Who knows who visits my dwelling without me? I took with me a small, razor-sharp tourist hatchet, which I bought in sporting goods back in Soviet times. I closed the door, put on my skis, and set off. According to my calculations, I should reach that factory in 2 hours. We fastened skis on the frosty snow. We trampled deep tracks. I was rhythmically shuffling my feet, helping myself with poles. The terrain was mostly flat, although a few times I had to roll between small fir trees on low slides. At that moment, my brain woke up again and screamed for all it was worth, a sense of danger. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a movement. An indistinct shadow flashed among the tree trunks. Ahead of me, the forest was closing in on my road, a very convenient place for an attack. Some beast was cheering me silently through the scrap storms. I was almost running. The parade of my breath must have been bigger than steam engine smoke. There was no more strength left. At last I climbed a high hill. At its bottom, at its very foot, protruded out of the snow the half-ruined buildings of a trophy factory abandoned before the war. I thought I could even see my car on the highway to the small railroad car depot. I was frantically thinking of what to do. Ahead was a gentle slope pulling the highway all the way to the factory. Here and there, the tops of small fir trees and koryak trees were sticking out of the snow. There was no way out. I pushed off with my poles from behind, slid down the slope, fixed my skis on the snowy virgin land, and tree trunks flashed around me. In my head pulse was only one thought, only not to fall. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw how something huge, parachute black with red undercoat, huge jumps, carried Steenie course, turning from snags and sticking out of the snow to her. The plant was rapidly approaching. By inertia, I literally flew into the open rusty gate and braked a few meters away from the car, shaking my skis off my feet. I pressed the central lock button on the remote, yanked the handle. The front doors. The door was like glued, frozen shut. I yanked several times, almost ripping the handle out. No effect. The door wouldn't open. Behind me, I heard the stinking breath of the creature. I pulled out my axe and pressed my back against the car. A few meters away from me stood a huge, scary beast, black in underground hair, a muzzle, something reminiscent of a gorilla. Sharp fangs, huge paws with sharp claws sticking out of its mouth. The beast stood on its hind legs and looked at me curiously. I saw no aggression in its appearance, only interest. I pulled the handle again. The door creaked open a couple seconds later, and I was already inserting the key into the ignition. The engine started at once and charged smoothly, despite the frost. The beast, standing motionless, only tilted your head to the side. I balled my hand across the back seat and pulled a loaf of white bread out of the bag. I rolled down the window and tossed it to the beast. He stood up on 4 paws and leaned over the treat. He touched the gift with his paw a few times and carefully took the bread with his teeth. The loaf instantly disappeared into the toothy jaws. The beast sneezed quite dog-like, turned, and leisurely sank towards the forest. I arrived in the city at night. All the way I was shaking with excitement. It was only when the lights of the suburbs flashed that I was a little relieved. It is now I, remembering the events of those days, so chipper, but then almost went crazy with fear. Driving up the driveway, I did not drive the car to the front entrance, but put it not far from the gate. I had a large lot, so there was plenty of room. I picked up my bag and walked to one entrance, opened the door with my key and entered the hall. Complete silence. I turned on the lights and realized there was no one on the first floor. Strange. What did I want to see? It's almost 2 o'clock. My wife's long asleep. For a while, I stood and admired how the light played on the various films hanging on the walls, real Oriental carpets and cold weapons, all that could be brought from my business trip's antique steel. As if lurking in a long barrier of carpets, hiding my deadly power for the time being, I put down my bag and went to the kitchen, poured myself a whiskey, and drank it almost in a volley. Suddenly I heard a noise. It sounded like someone even shrieked. Anxiety instantly entered my brain. I listened. It was coming from the second floor. I took the broad-bladed sword off the wall and started to climb up the stairs, trying not to knock my boots on the steps. There was the bedroom. I carefully pulled the doors open. Not a bright light burned, but I managed to make out 2 naked bodies entwined in loving ecstasy on our marital bed. My Adriana saddled and unfamiliar Poroshenko Kersey woolly, male and head tilted up, and hoarse from the swell of passion, in a voice almost shouted before me clearly came the voice of my lover rhythmically on his forehead, reading my wife. I am better than your loser. The male continued. Yes, you are the best. I love you. I realized it was time to intervene. I coughed and too. Finally I was seeing my lover, uncovered, climbed out from under my wife, and stared at me absent-mindedly. Who is it? He turned to Adriana. There was disappointment mixed with curiosity in his question. It's my husband. The wife took a risk and pulled the sheet up to her chin, and the husband almost cheerfully said the male, Go for a walk. We're not done yet. He scratched his hairy chest and went at me, clearly intending to throw me out of the room. His insolence made my eyes darken, but I quickly pulled myself together. The thought flashed through my mind that he was an immortal. For some reason it made me laugh. I threw forward my hand with a sword. The blade with a whistle cut the air on the face of the male. A bloody streak appeared. No, I struck flat. I'm not a killer. The hairy lover roared, threw himself at me. I saw it coming, and dodging his straight punch aimed at my face, I struck his hand holding the sword in the jaw. The male horde with teeth and face down fell to the floor. Did you kill him? Shrieked Adriana. It's Thomas. His boys will bury you. I didn't say anything. Dialing the police number on my cell phone. Hello. What's your emergency? I got an answer almost immediately. A stranger broke into my house. Help. He's probably trying to kill me. I yelled into the phone, faking hysterics. Then I removed a weighty steel fireplace poker from its stand and gently placed it in his hand, lying knocked out by the striped guest. Adriana looked at me in silence. The hysteria seemed to end when the lovers' heads were loaded into the car. The familiar captain took me aside. Is that what you mean? That's Thomas. He runs the market. A lawyer's coming tomorrow, and he'll probably be released. He's a vindictive bastard. Could be trouble. Thank you, Sergeyevich. I understand everything. Forewarned is forearmed. I shook the captain's hand. When I returned to the bedroom, Adriana was lying motionless, covered with a sheet. I was silent. My senses were gone. Only an unbearable pain was burning in my chest. Finally, my wife sobbed, returning to her knees and shuddering with her whole body. Adriana. I said the once favorite name with disgust. I'm going to leave now. Make the transmission downstairs so that in the morning when I wake up you won't be here." She started to say something through her tears, but I didn't listen. I quickly left the bedroom. When I woke up, Adriana was still home. She was trying to explain something to me. She was apologizing, singing an old woman's song about lack of attention, about how I'd stopped seeing her as a woman. She even went so far as to say she cheated out of great love for me. She said she'd be faithful to me for the rest of her life, until her deathbed. She said something about being forced into it, but she only loves me. At the end of her monologue, Adriana knelt down and grabbed my legs, begging for forgiveness, but something inside me snapped. I silently listened to this nonsense and wanted only one thing: to get her out of here. When the cab arrived, Adriana stood by the car for a long time, apparently still hoping for something. Then she got into the car and left my life. The next day, an unfamiliar man came to me, a lawyer, young, brisk, young man, with a long nose and long hair in a bundle, making him look like a rat. He leisurely climbed out of a large black SUV and approached my gate. The intercom buzzed. "What do you want?" I asked him rudely, looking at the screen at the uninvited guest. "Mr. Smith." There was contempt in the lawyer's voice. "We need to talk." "I don't need to." "Get out." I waited curiously for his reaction. It was obvious that the lawyer had not expected such a reception. He was silent for a while, then pressed the intercom button again. "What now?" I said unhappily. "Mr. Smith." His voice became much more courteous. "I have business with you. Please let me in." I pressed a button and the gate opened. "Mr. Smith, Thomas wants to sue you for moral damages, but he's a kind man. He wants to talk to you first." The lawyer was watching my reaction carefully. "I have nothing to talk to your landlord about. He broke into my house and assaulted me. I'm the one who should be suing him." I grinned defiantly. "Thomas was invited by your wife. He was her guest. After all, it's her house too." The lawyer wouldn't give up. "I own the house. My wife's not even registered here, so it's trespassing." I looked the guy right in the eye. "I should have just shot your Thomas." "Thomas doesn't see it that way. He's a stubborn lawyer. He wants to meet with you to discuss compensation for his injuries. Tell your master I have nothing to discuss with him. Now get out." I resolutely got up from the chair. The lawyer left silently. But I knew this was just the beginning. My cell phone was ringing. It was a familiar number. "I'm listening." I answered quickly. "I have an order. Are you home now?" The speaker immediately took the bull by the horns. "Yes, come over." Opposite me sat a middle-aged man with a slight shine on his temples. "I need antique Oriental silver. It doesn't matter what region, preferably from the 16th or 17th century." My interlocutor took a sip from his glass. "Coins, jewelry, or dishes?" I specified. "Both." The man grinned. "Preferably from Afghanistan, or at the worst from Central Asia, India." "It can be from India." The man put the glass on the table. "But what do you take or not? What is the price of the question?" I'm a little tense. The order is complicated in a troubled region. The customer named the amount. I was quite satisfied with it. "In what time frame?" I asked again. "There is no specific term. As it is done, but don't take too long." "I agree, but I have unfinished business here." I poured whiskey for myself and my guest. "I need help." In a calm voice, asked the guest. "I guess so." I took a swig of whiskey, and I started laying out my problem. "That's a bitch, life. You barely manage to recover from one blow, and then immediately get another. It's like walking through a storm of evil with your eyes closed at night, and you're scared to open your eyes. Suddenly you'll fall on a limb, and you'll be left without an eye. That's why you rely on your hands. You cover your face with one hand and put the other one forward so that you don't bump your forehead or nose on the trunk. Have you seen a child's merry-go-round? Everything goes in a circle. Horses, deer, goats. Everybody goes back to the beginning. and back again. The next round, and on and on. Animals. Carousel. It probably feels like they're moving forward, but they're actually running in a closed circle. That's life. All the events in it repeat themselves with enviable regularity. Someone said that life is a spiral. Everything in it develops in an ascending order. Alas, it is not. At least not for me. A few years ago, I fell in love with a girl who happened to come my way. Her name was Kathy. I said her name, and the sweetness from the volume spilled over my body. How many years has it been? I still can't get over it. I thought she had a crush on me, too. But I guess that was just me. I had to leave urgently. There was something I couldn't put off. I left her the keys and asked her to wait for me. She promised to wait as long as it took. She said beautiful words about love and fidelity, but when I came back, she was gone. In the drawer were the keys to the house and nothing else. No answer, no hello. She didn't even leave a note. I searched for her for almost a year, quit my job, picked up all my friends, used all my connections, but Kathy just vanished into thin air. I searched morgues and hospitals, asylums and prisons, but to no avail. No trace of her. Somehow, in a drunken delirium, I thought she'd come from outer space. There was no other explanation. It took me another year to come to my senses. I never thought it was possible to fall in love with a woman who wasn't remarkable. She didn't have model looks or any outstanding charisma. She was just a girl of many kinds. But it so happened that without her, I had no life. But time passed. Gradually, her image began to blur. Life, in any case, dictates its own rules. I slowly began to return to normal. There were orders again, and therefore money. And where there is money, sooner or later a woman starts. That's how Adriana appeared on my horizon, a young, beautiful party girl. She had me by the balls. We met at some party, dedicated. I do not remember what I did not particularly get after the ladies, poured myself, and gradually kicked. The day before I had returned from another business trip, and I had money to drink. I was looking for an excuse to get away quickly. It was unbearable to be among the party, office plankton and major of these girls with fake breasts and one twist in the head. But at some point, a young female character landed next to me. Without entering into unnecessary polemics, she poured wine into my glass, not forgetting herself. "Why be sad?" she asked after we'd had our drinks. I shrugged. I didn't feel like talking. So handsome and all alone. The girl wouldn't stop. "My name is Adriana, and you're the one who's been brought here." That's the first thing I thought of. I had absolutely no desire to spread my tail and start the mating dance. But the maiden did not miss the initiative, seeing that her efforts in them me ineffective. She withdrew to the second line of defense and went on the counterattack. Stupid party. She started from afar, pouring me more wine. It's strange to feel alone in a crowd. "What's stopping you from leaving here?" I muttered languidly. "Call a cab and go." My cell phone was dead. Adriana looked hopefully into my eyes. "If you want, I can help you." Those were fateful words, only I realized it much later. Another glass of wine, and now I'm sitting in a cab next to Adriana. No, she didn't come onto me, didn't get in my pants. She was sitting next to me, just like a caring friend. Then it turned out she'd forgotten the money. I paid off the driver and went up to her so she could pay me back. It was all sewn up in white threads, like the debt couldn't be paid back later or forgiven at all. It was just that I was already drunk and had trouble perceiving reality. In the morning, I woke up in bed with Adriana. I had no rejection. But as long as it happened, so be it. If not Adriana, then some other friend. No difference at all. 2 months later, we got married. It wasn't a big wedding, but it was elaborate, with important guests and a few relatives. We lived in my house. All the property belonged to me. The store and the antique firm, too. We didn't have a prenuptial agreement, but it was impossible to get anything away from me, except for the car I'd given her. But that was a drop in the bucket. We had no children. Adriana took her time. I didn't insist, like I had a premonition. But my wife was head over heels in social life. Girlfriends, parties, going out. But no sign of infidelity. Always home on time. Phone B, he during our life together. No one has ever cut me in the eye behavior Adriana in public without me all rank and noble. And then there's the affair with the market director Thomas. Honestly, I didn't understand why I was younger than her lover. I didn't deny her anything. Sex almost every day, which is what she lacked. I didn't go into the moral and psychological details of married life. Women are a pain in the ass to understand. They say they don't understand themselves sometimes. But the fact of infidelity was, as they say, obvious. No doubt I was worried, but not as much as I was after Kathy disappeared. Resentment mixed with bewilderment, a slight ache in my heart and soul. No matter what anyone says, no husband is ready to calmly accept his wife's infidelity. It is not pleasant to suddenly learn that for several years lived with an empty person on whom he spent the warmth of his soul. They say that between love and hate is a very thin line. Perhaps it is so. I was more than surprised when I realized that the love I did feel was just a fading fire that quickly went out. In the days that followed, as a clown friend of mine used to say, it's not my circus and it's not my monkeys. Well, in the end, I liked the single life better. So with Sam's release, I filed for divorce. And while that was going on, I started getting ready for a trip down south. But no such luck. Adriana was determined to take half my business and my house. It's a well-known fact that lawyers can do anything for a lot of money. My ex-wife didn't have that kind of money, so her lover fit right in. It's hard to say what motivated him, but it certainly wasn't love. Most likely a desire to get back at me for the humiliation and broken face. 2 days later, my lawyer contacted me and informed me that they were filing a lawsuit for property division. I realized that legally they had no chance, so other methods of persuasion would be used. And I seemed to know what they were. A week later, Adriana's nimble attorney set up a meeting to resolve, as he put it, the contentious issues. As I expected, the lawyer was an old acquaintance of mine. Yes, the one who looked like a rat. I brought my firm's attorney to the meeting, not so much to help as a witness. Apparently, the meeting was designed to intimidate me into sharing my property and money with a poor, abandoned woman. I decided to play the fool to fully understand their devious plans. Adriana outdid herself. Black, austere clothes, a veil over her face. She was grieving hard for the family I'd destroyed. It was mostly her lawyer who spoke. He talked at length about Adriana's unhappy fate, about her misstep, and about forgiveness. Finally, he got to the point, without a second's hesitation. He offered to amicably divide my firm and other property as compensation for my wife's better years with me. He made such a face that I had no doubt what would happen to me if I refused. I sat silent and occasionally blinking my eyes, playing the complete idiot. Even my lawyer shook his head doubtfully and tried to object to the rat, but he immediately shut his mouth and looked at me expectantly. I stood up, shaking off my sucker mask, and said only one word, no, as I was leaving the meeting room. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the rat dialing someone's number on his iPhone. In the evening, 2 big men and Adriana's lawyer came to see me. My security guard escorted them to my office. Of course, the presence of security in my house somewhat discouraged the lawyer. He didn't expect me to be so eager, but nevertheless, he got right down to business. For almost an hour he frightened me with all kinds of consequences of my refusal, but he didn't threaten me directly. I withstood his diarrhea of words and sent him away. From what I had heard, I realized I had to strike a preemptive strike and end this balaghanza. I looked at my wristwatch. 12:30 at night. The landlord's late. Quiet. His family's visiting from home, so we won't be disturbed. I rode in the chair. I wanted to smoke, but the smoke would give me away right away. I can't help it. I'll have to do without smoking for now. I heard a noise from the street. More V's are coming. Well, finally, the front door slammed and heavy footsteps were heard. The door opened and a carcass clad in a black coat came tumbling into the room. I saw Thomas's hand reach for the light switch. No need to turn on the light. My words sounded like the voice of an angel on Judgment Day. The fat man froze and slowly turned in my direction. "Who are you?" With difficulty, he squeezed the words out of himself. "A horse in a coat." I couldn't deny myself a joke. "Sit down. We'll talk." I pointed to the chair across from me. Thomas understood my gesture correctly and slowly lowered himself into the chair. Gradually, he began to come to his senses. For about 20 minutes, I listened to Kareem talk about what Kareem would subject me to for breaking into his house. He even tried to call security, but no one came to his shouting. Then he started talking. I will not recount the text of my monologue. It wasn't very long. The gist of it is that if he gets in my way again, I will cut him off. No, not what you think. Just his head. At those words, I turned on the floor lamp, and Thomas saw right in front of him on the coffee table, bleeding, the severed head of his dog, the head of his favorite marble dog, Hector, as fat as his owner. You should have seen the horror in the eyes of my wife's lover. He seemed to swallow his tongue in fear. The silent scene lasted about a minute. Then his cell phone rang. Thomas pulled out his cell phone with trembling hands. I quickly snatched it up and put it on speakerphone. Someone in a panic had informed Tolstoy, the market director, that the food warehouses were on fire. I looked at Thomas. I thought I was more than convincing. I could have blown up his car for the last time. But that was overkill. I got up and walked out, leaving my master to admire the head of his favorite dog. Walking down the dark corridor, I had to step several times over the bodies lying in picturesque poses, knocked out by the guards' stun guns. Two dark figures separated from the wall. "Let's go." I spoke quietly. "How's that dog sleeping on its hind legs?" The man in black smirked. "Did you really think I really killed the dog?" "Of course not. I'm an animal lover. But you have to admit, a rubberhead can be pretty impressive too." The divorce went smoothly. I was alone in court, and the whole thing took a little while. In order for a business trip to be successful, you need to prepare, surf the internet, go to the library. Not everything you need for your work can be found online. Wikipedia is nothing but a big virtual dumping ground, where everyone dumps unverified junk. But I didn't want unreliable data and information. My life was at stake, so it was impossible to make a mistake. The frosty winter evening seemed endless. Putting aside Keller's Guide to Antique Oriental Silver, I pampered myself with a Cuban cigar stuffed into the corner of an old leather sofa, a dark lampshade. The floor lamp cast a sharply defined circle of light on the floor, while the rest of the room was hidden in semi-darkness behind the wide glass door leading to the front porch. The frost was crackling, and the fluffy snow in the flower beds shimmered silver, sweat still and full of moonlight. The loneliness did not depress me. I always found something to do, especially when I was preparing to dive into another expedition. And if truth be told, I didn't want to socialize. I was a stranger to my neighbors. I'd disappear for long periods of time, and then reappear. They didn't seem to realize it. I was working, and that was good. Less they know, more they sleep. I smelled smoke, put the chicken cigar in an antique Latin ashtray. I got up and went into the kitchen, poured 3 fingers of whiskey into a pre-prepared glass, threw in a few pieces of ice, and took a big gulp. And at that moment the intercom rang. It was already 11:30 p.m. on the ancient ship's clock. I wondered who it was at this late hour. I reluctantly approached the background on the screen. In the not bright lantern light, saw a woman standing near my gate. She was wearing a dark fur coat and some kind of shawl, tangled up to her eyes. She didn't look like anyone I knew. "I wonder who that is. Who do you need a sip of whiskey?" I asked into the intercom microphone. "I need the owner," the woman said distinctly, leaning her gloveless hand against the brick fence. I had more questions, but I suddenly felt sorry to keep a stranger in the cold. So I opened the gate. "Come in on the camera." I saw the woman, staggering, walked to the native porch. "Is she drunk?" The first thing I thought, the woman with difficulty climbed the steps and was already standing in front of the front door. "Hello, I can come in," quietly mumbled the unexpected guest. "Come into the hall." I let her in and closed the door behind her. "No, I don't think she's drunk." The woman hesitantly walked into the brightly lit hallway and stopped, looking at me confused. I even shuddered inwardly. Large blue eyes looked at me, curious and slightly wary. "Take off your coat and give me your handkerchief." The stranger took off the slightly snowy artificial fur coat, remaining in an incomprehensible color woolen dress, which lightened her well-composed small figure, unwrapped on a warm-down coat, handkerchief, and with her eyes began to look for hangers. I, finally coming to my senses, politely took the clothes from her hands to the guest and hung them carefully on the hangers. She dragged the boots off her feet and looked at me questioningly. I was speechless for a moment. Standing in front of me was a charming young girl. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why had she come? These questions swirled around in my head, but I could find no answer. I didn't know many girls in this city, especially such charming ones. I stood silently for a while, trying not to look the stranger in the face. The pause was clearly dragging on. "Come in. I'll give you some hot tea." A gallant and hospitable host began to awaken in me. "Sit down on the sofa." The girl went further into the hall. Looking around curiously, she stopped near the carpet with weapons, silently looking at the deadly steel and Orsa for a while. Then she looked at me, smiled, and finally took a seat on the couch tentatively in her dress. Leaving my guest in the hall, I made my way to the kitchen, collected the kettle, removed the boiling water in the stockpots, found some carcasses, and all this splendor neatly arranged on the coffee table. The girl carefully took the cup, took a polite sip, and looked at me. "So, what can I do for you?" I asked politely. "Are you Smith, Yuri Pavlovich?" asked the stranger, carefully putting the cup with hot tea on a plate. "That's right. With whom do I have the honor?" I said in a social tone. I felt like I'd even let my tail wag in front of the stranger. "My name is Betty." I shrugged. "I have very important business with you." She raised her blue eyes to me. "Do you remember Kathy?" I choked with surprise. Kathy. My heart pounded traitorously so the girl wouldn't see my excitement. I got up and walked to the window. Man changes with time, but love doesn't die. It can lurk somewhere inside and wait for its time to make your heart beat faster again. But I've really changed. New thoughts, views, passions, sadness, and joy. Sometimes I feel sorry for the old me, but I can't go back. And there's no reason to. I lit a cigarette and opened the window. Outside the window still rained frost and glitter. The fluffy snow shimmered silver under the moonlight, and the hall was warm. The fireplace was burning in the corner. Occasionally there was a crackle and a fierce spark, but for some reason, a chill ran down my spine. "Excuse me, how old are you?" I asked the guest. A tactless question. "Does it matter?" Betty shrugged. "You didn't answer my question." She looked me carefully in the eye. I held her gaze. "Yes, I remember Kathy. She lived here for a while. And then she disappeared without leaving a note." I leaned back in my chair. Memories of Kathy hurt me. I'd been looking for her, but to no avail. That was it, really. I wasn't going to open my heart to a stranger, even one as charming as Betty. The girl was silent for a while, as if deciding whether or not to speak further. "You couldn't find her." It was evident that Betty was struggling to say the words. "Until I met you." Kathy was friends with a guy named Michael. They were getting married. They'd already bought the rings. But then she met you. Kathy lost her head. She fell in love with you after you left. She waited patiently. But then her aunt arrived, your housekeeper. I don't know what happened between them, but she kicked Kathy out, and she had to come home. Michael found out she'd come back, found her and beat her badly. At home, she was abused too, called the town whore. One day, Michael showed up at their house and asked her to marry him. Kathy had no choice. so she said yes. When she found out she was pregnant, she thought it was Michael's baby. For almost a year and a half, they lived more or less tolerably well. And then Michael started looking at the baby, trying to find a resemblance to himself. He got the idea that it wasn't his daughter. He took a DNA test and it all came out. That night, he beat Kathy again. He screamed that she was a bad woman, a cuckoo who slipped him a fattened child. Michael took all his wife's jewelry, even her wedding ring. He beat her almost every day, and she couldn't take it anymore. One day, when Michael was at work, Kathy took the baby and went to live with me in my second cousin's house. I was renting a room in a communal apartment. Michael didn't try to find her. A month later, he filed for divorce. Kathy didn't object. The three of us lived together for almost 2 months. Kathy didn't work, and we all lived on my salary. But we were desperately short of money. So Kathy decided to go to Moscow to earn money. She left the child with me and left. She couldn't take her daughter with her because she was going nowhere. Before she left, she told me about you and that the child was yours. I had some money. I bought her a ticket to Moscow. Then Kathy wrote that she got a job as a waitress in a cafe. That's where she met Sebastian. He was studying in Moscow and was taking his final exams this year. Sebastian started courting her. They know how to round a knave fool's head. Promised to marry. Offered to go to his parents in Latvia. No more letters from Kathy. Where is she now? And what about her? I don't know. But why didn't she find me? I almost screamed, especially if it's my baby. She knew I was back when she ran away from Michael. She came to see you, but she was met by a young woman who called herself your wife. She kicked Kathy out and said if she shows up again, she'll have to deal with the police. Betty took a sip from her cup. When Kathy got married, she changed her last name. That's why you haven't found her. I was lost for a while. Where's the girl now? I asked when I came to my senses. She's with me. I left her at a friend's house so I wouldn't have to drag her out in the cold. Betty sighed heavily. I wouldn't have dared. But I was made redundant a month ago. Christina and I have nothing to live on. The girl covered her face with her palms and burst into tears. Frankly, I was shocked. I had no reason not to believe the guest. Everything she told me was logical. What do you want me to do? I asked Betty. I want to ask you for some money. We'll go back home for the first time, and I won't bother you again. Betty spoke quickly, as if she was afraid I would throw her out. I've been promised a job. She didn't finish. It was clear to me. It wasn't a job. Are you hungry? Unexpectedly, I asked. She looked at me in surprise. Let's go to the kitchen to get something to eat, and then we'll go get Veronica. I hailed a cab, and we drove almost to the outskirts of town. At the old house, a friend of Betty's had rented a room under a pile of codswallop. We found a little girl. She cuddled up to Betty with her little arms around her neck. I'm hungry. The baby cried softly. The girl stroked her head affectionately. I tried to take Christina in my arms, but she screamed with fear and clung even tighter to Betty. When we got home, I cooked dinner with Betty's help because I had no idea what a small child could eat. Then I took the guests to my bedroom and put them to bed. I got up early, made coffee, poured myself a big cup, and sat down in the kitchen. I had made my decision overnight and was now waiting for Betty to wake up. Did I believe her? Yes and no. At least I decided to take a DNA test, and then we'll see. I didn't call my mother. She had enough on her mind as it was. She lived with Katya, my niece, so I didn't bother her yet. Betty came into the kitchen, and I poured her coffee and slid her some water and toast. As soon as Christina woke up, we'd leave. She adjusted her dress. Thank you. Tears came to her eyes again. What's the matter? Why is that? Do women always cry for everything? I'll tell you what. How's your job going to work out? It's hard to predict. In any case, the baby needs to be fed and clothed. If you don't mind, I'd like to hire you as a housekeeper. You'll live here with the baby. The money I gave you Consider it an advance. I put a card in front of her. This is for groceries and clothes. Buy whatever you need for your child. Do you have a cell phone? Betty shook her head in the negative. I slid her the box with the new iPhone in it. You'll figure it out on your own. She nodded quickly. My cell phone and the driver's cell phone are already in there. If you need to go anywhere, call and they'll take you. As soon as Christina wakes up and eats breakfast, we'll go to the lab and take the DNA test. I'm leaving soon, and I want to know the results before I go. I said all that in one breath. So, any objections or not? Betty shook his head in the negative. 6 days later, the DNA test was ready. I was not the girl's father. Betty read the test results and looked up at me. God, what are we going to do now? She sounded doomed. Don't think, we'll leave right away. I'm so sorry. I didn't even think it could be like this. I was sure Christina was your daughter. She put the card on the table and went to the second floor to get Christina. Wait, I slammed my palm on the capital. What exactly has changed? I need a housekeeper anyway, especially since I'm going away, maybe for a long time. By the way, Lena's coming today. She'll be with you while I'm away. The baby will be enough for you, Betty. The girl looked at me in surprise. So I can stay, she said. Of course you can. You work for me. Everything stays the way it was. I grinned. Yes, everything repeats itself. A few years ago, I also said goodbye to the girl I loved and asked her to wait for me. The circle had closed. I was about to get into a cab when Betty asked to come with me to the airport. I didn't mind. As I checked in for my flight and headed to the pogrom control area, Betty suddenly kissed me on the cheek and whispered, "Come back soon." As I passed through border control, I turned around. 2 girls, big and small, were waving at me. I could see tears on Betty's face. After a 6-hour flight, the plane landed safely at the airport of one of the Central Asian republics. Barely had I gone through all the post-flight formalities and stepped into the welcoming hall, my gaze caught a familiar face from the dense crowd. Jack. I had no doubt that he would be the one to greet me. I raised my hand, signaling that I was seeing an old friend. "Hello, brother," dressed in a long robe of camel and wool and skullcap. He gave me a hug. "Long time no see." "Hello, Jack. I was genuinely happy to see you. Almost 5 years. Let's go to my car." Jack picked up my bag, and we went to the exit from the airport. We looped through the narrow streets of the ancient southern city. Our car finally pulled into a narrow gate and stopped in the shade of the heat. A young woman, fast server, taken, gave Orhan. Seeing us, covered her face and bowed. Jack said something to her in an unfamiliar language. She bowed once more and disappeared into the house. "Did you get married?" I looked at the woman and turned to my friend. Jack took off his robe and threw it carelessly next to the cushions. But I'm not an old man. I didn't go any further into that subject. We settled around a low table covered with a colored tablecloth. The young woman poured the tea in half and disappeared back into the house. Education, though. Then we ate for a long time, washing down the food with flavored tea. Jack asked about the health of my loved ones. He was saddened to learn of the circumstances of my younger brother's death. "Did you get your revenge?" he asked me. "Yes, briefly. As a man should," I answered. My friend nodded contentedly. Dusk began to fall. The hot southern sun slowly crept over the horizon. The heat began to subside. Soon we heard the cry of my Odin calling to the evening Maghreb. It looked like there was a mosque nearby. While Jack performed the threefold prayer, I managed to drink 2 cups of flavored tea. When it became dark, a silent woman lit several lanterns, illuminating the place where we were seated. From the darkness, the loud rolling of the CKAD and the rustling of bat wings could be heard before us. There is a ruin of an ancient tower not far away. There are a lot of bats there. They hunt at night and sometimes fly in here, Jack said. As if reading my mind, we finally got down to business. I briefly told my friend the essence of the problem, without going into details. Why burden a good man with unnecessary information? Especially since I have to work moderately anyway. There's no point in going. Jack said, wishing with his lips. It's dangerous to go beyond the river. The teachers are running rampant there now. They hit the Americans well and will soon take control of the whole country. We need to go southeast to Sea Valley. You might find something there. But we can look here too. I nodded in agreement. Very few of their caravans passed through the country beyond the river, so it is unlikely to find anything of value there. But in the Samara Valley you can search. There may be coins and silverware, just what I need. I'll look here, maybe I'll find something. After a pause, Jack continued, You take my car, gear, weapons, and head southeast. You'll pick up your car papers and gun permit tomorrow. He shouted something into the darkness, and a light came on in the doorway. Let's go inside and get some rest. Jack nudged me with his hand toward the house. The silent woman led me into a small room with a bed and a small table. A copper basin and a pitcher of water stood on the table. She pointed to the bed and said something. I nodded in response, though I understood nothing. The woman said another short phrase and left. I stripped off my clothes, slept, ran cold water over my face, and laid down on the bed. It was still hot, and I did not cover myself with white sheets covering my eyes. I lay there and remembered the events of the last time. Too many of them had come upon me. I was awakened by a slight rustle, and the gentle touch of someone's hand on my chest. I wanted to ask who was here, but a soft, lavender-scented hand gently clamped my mouth shut. A woman's light and smooth body came over me. The unfamiliar woman was kissing my breasts, stroking my lower abdomen. From the surprise, I lost my ability to resist, and everything happened. There was no disappointment. The warm southern night, soaked with love and oriental delights, did its work as the naked young woman slid into my arms with a quiet tone. Responding to my kisses in my soul, calm and peace was born for the first time in a while. As I fell asleep, gently cuddling the submissive woman's body, I remembered Jack's words. I'm not an old man. My conscience was at peace. I was awakened by the aroma of fresh emergency coffee. Jack sat squinting into the rising sun, holding a cup of hot drink in his hand. I quickly washed my face and joined my old friend. How restful. Taking a sip, Jack looked at me, Rahim. I haven't slept like that in a while. I tried to catch the subtext in my host's words, but it was as if he was reading my mind. It was Camille. She's a widow. Her husband died in the desert a year ago. It's a good thing they didn't have any children. She lives in my house now. Did she like you at first sight, as they say? Jack added something in his own language. I lowered my eyes. Well, after all, it was her choice. We drank another cup of coffee. Finally, Jack slid a large diamond bag toward me. On top covered a netted assault rifle with a magazine attached. Lying there was a Kalashnikov assault rifle. On the side I fumbled for 2 fully infected horns. 3 is enough, Jack commented. You're not going to war. In the bag, there was still a knife with a long wide blade from the old war times artillery binoculars, wrapped in a desert-colored sniper's cape. At the very bottom of the bag lurked a familiar 1911 Colt and a spare magazine with ammunition, ID, groceries, and everything else in the car. You'll figure it out later. Jack stood up. God bless you, Adriana. There was a shriek, and the door showed Camille in its opening. Not paying attention to Jack, she ran up to me and hugged me. As I left town, I was followed by a long scream. The car was rushing down a sun-cracked highway, cutting the red sands into almost 2 equal parts. The road was laid out along an old caravan route. Back in Soviet times, the thermometer on the dashboard read plus 47 degrees. The engine was running at a breakneck pace. The arrow of the temperature gauge was inexorably rejoicing at the 100 mark. I sat in the driver's seat, open warm robe, under which there was only one swimming trunks. It was the only way to escape the heat, and not for long. Periodically on the horizon flashed mountain peaks, and I did not realize whether they were really mountains or ghostly mirages. This wait died less and less often. Through the desert drove cars destroyed from the heat asphalt for metal, wind, and the remaining few gas stations spent on the sides of the road. And all because of the heat, which burned all living things, making the vast desert even bigger. Its sands stretched all the way to the Aral Sea. I remembered Jack telling me that in his childhood in these places gardens bloomed and water rivers flowed. Now all this is in the past. The only source of moisture is seasonal short rains, and even those had long ago lost their unequal battle. The sun was steadily rolling toward dusk, but it was still mercilessly burning the dry air. The desert wind pondered the tops of the sandy velvets, throwing hot sand on the road. The day was leaning towards evening, and I realized that I would have to spend the night in the car. The only thing I was glad about was that with the setting of the sun the heat would subside and I would be able to breathe a full breath. The sun was almost touching the horizon when I drove off the highway on more or less level ground, turned off the engine, tired for the day, and started to use things, spread the seat, and put the sleeping bag. Took out of the trunk a stove with gas. I didn't want to eat. I was only thirsty. I quickly lit Gorilka and put a kettle and poured some brew into it. In such heat locals drink strong green tea, cock tea, as they call it. While the drink was being prepared, I took out of my bag an automatic rifle, took out a cartridge in a cartridge, put it on the safety, and put it on the seat. There was no habitation for many dozens of kilometers around. It was as if I was in space, but you have to be ready for any surprise. Soon I was sitting on the hood behind a glass camel and cat, and was enjoying drinking hot tea and quenching my thirst. Suddenly, the wind picked up. The sky began to nod, clouds not about a new arrow gleamed lightning, and after a while thunder rumbled right above my head. I could clearly see jets of rain appearing in the sky. I was even going to hide in the cabin. But the downpour did not fall on the common land. The rain did not reach the ground and, escaping in the air, thundered a few more times, and only one warm drop fell on my face, still reaching the ground. The wind threw a handful of sand in my face as if in mockery, like a good portion of fine shot. The clouds crept slowly northward and into the sky. First one star shone faintly, the second, and then in 5 minutes I saw the sky covered with meaningless schemes, constellations. The moon's not bright sickle was interrogating everything in dull gray tones. I went to bed early. I opened the windows a little for ventilation. I couldn't sleep for a long time. All sorts of things came into my head, but gradually fatigue took its toll, and I fell asleep. I woke up to a rustling noise. The car shook a few times. I opened my eyes sharply and looked out the window. It was darkness all around. What was it? Maybe a snake. But how big would it have to be to rock the car like that? Suddenly, a wave of black panic and unbridled fear swept over my brain. My body felt like a village. I took a deep, hysterical breath of air and arched my back. By an incredible effort of will, I forced myself to find the flashlight and turn it on. Its light trembled, fading into darkness, still the same dead emptiness. All around, I sat there wet with sweat, feeling my heart tearing out of my chest and my frequent breathing drowning out all sounds. I gradually came to myself. Panic-past thoughts stopped rushing around in my head like frenzied cockroaches. I wiped the sweat from my face with the sleeve of my robe and exhaled deeply. Maybe it was just a dream. I tried to calm myself, slipped my gaze, dedicated to the not bright color of the desert. I spotted something black, quickly dissolved into the darkness. I remembered about the automatic rifle and put it beside me. The caliber is small, but still. Besides, there's also a Colt .45 caliber pocket gun. Feeling the weapon in my hands, I almost completely recovered. I took a swig of whiskey for courage and kept quiet. Listened to the night. There was another rustle. Somewhere not far away, the sand hissed and scattered. But the car stood still, and I fell asleep again. They say that in the most deserted sandy areas of Central Asia there is a Volga and a good one. It is a meter-long earthworm, dark red in color. It only appears on the surface during the hottest months. The local population is mystically terrified of him. After all, he is supposedly able to kill at a distance, whether spitting out a deadly poison or striking the victim with an electric shock. The legend of it is so widespread and so uniform that one has to think. At its core, it really is some extremely rare endangered animal, probably a relic of ancient times, now surviving in the most desolate corners of Central Asia. Here in the Red Sands, according to Jack, George has also been seen for a long time. He once told me that the worm appears only in the heat of June and July. Later it burrows into the ground and sleeps. The locals were sure that the worm has not gone anywhere and periodically collects tribute with human lives. Expeditions were repeatedly sent to search for the Long George. In 1954, on the territory of Inner Mongolia, worked American scientists on 2 Land Rovers. They left the settlement and disappeared without a trace at the request of the U.S. government. Mongolian authorities organized a search for the missing, found in one of the hard-to-reach areas of the Gobi. Both vehicles appeared to be derelict. 6 corpses lay nearby, as they had been exposed to the sun for a long time. The exact cause of death of the expedition members could not be established. It is assumed that they were the victim of a Long George. In the 1970s, 2 Soviet expeditions visited here in the Red Sands, trying to discover the elusive worm. They failed to catch this beastie, but they collected numerous proofs of the reality of its existence. But the results of the expeditions were not published anywhere, and they were soon forgotten by everyone except the locals. Abruptly opening my eyes, I met dusk again. Apparently, it was still early, but the heat had already gone under the pressure of the night. I tried to recall the dream, but it had already slipped away from me, leaving me with a pinched feeling of unease. The farther I traveled through the desert, the worse the road became. According to my calculations, I should reach the place by evening. The Sea Valley was nestled between mountains that already showed on the horizon in the distance. My gaze picked out a white dot. I stopped the car and pulled out my binoculars into the haze that rose from the asphalt. It was hard to make out the car. There were no people in sight. I decided to drive closer. There was no way to go around anyway. There was sand everywhere, and my car might get stuck. The closer I got, the louder the alarm bells rang in my head. Something's not right here. Just in case, I moved my automatic rifle closer, having previously taken it off the safety. The white Toyota stood with its nose in a pile of sand. The perimeter filled the road. In the cab, dropping his head on the steering wheel motionless, sat a man. His left arm hung along his torso. What was to the right I couldn't see. A little to the left, almost in the middle of the highway, a woman in jeans and a tank top was lying on her stomach. She also showed no signs of life. It looked like she was trying to get away from someone. I just don't know why she jumped out of the car. Maybe she was fleeing from the driver. I didn't hurry to turn off the engine and get out of the car. My brain was working hard, analyzing the situation. How long have they been here? No one overtook me. So they had driven here earlier, at least for a day. In this heat, the cadaveric end comes more slowly, but you can still see that the corpses are stale, and these are like cucumbers, as if just out of the shower. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the driver's arm hanging loosely along the body. There was a barely perceptible tremor. Doubt scattered like shrapnel from a grenade. Ambush. I knocked out the first speed while simultaneously lowering the right window. The car lurched forward in an arc, avoiding the woman lying there. One thought drilled into my brain, just so I wouldn't get stuck in the sand. With my right hand, I raised my automatic and fired a short burst, right at the driver of the Toyota. You could see the bullets fit into his body. He jerked a few times like a rag doll on a string and fell out of the cab. It looked like he was dead. For real now. A gun fell out of his right hand onto the sand. but I couldn't see the model on the left side of the road. There was a burst of gunfire. I could hear the bullets thudding against the side of my car. I stepped on the gas, and then the thing I was so afraid of happened. The car came to a stop, bogged down in a sandy recount. I opened the left door and, firing, rolled out onto the sand. A machine gun line whipped back. As fire burned my left forearm, I felt blood oozing down my arm. But the arm worked, so it was tangential. Did I get a fix on where the shot came from? I got the machine gun in the curves of my arm. I timed it just right when the enemy would try to finish me off, cut him off with a short burst. I didn't know how much ammo I had left. There was no way to get a spare magazine. There was still a woman left. In the silence, only the crunch of sand under heavy boots was heard. I leaned against the car, took the cooking machine, and began to wait. It's like a game here. Who's faster? Finally, I saw a shadow fall from behind the car. The sun was shining in their backs over the sand, and a head in a baseball cap appeared. My machine gun jerked, ejecting the last shell casing, and at my feet fell the body of the woman who had been lying on the road. I sat still for a few minutes, waiting for an attack, but all was quiet. I slowly crawled into the seat and turned the ignition key. The engine started instantly. Everything was normal. I carefully backed up, then took a slight right and pulled the car to a stop after driving through the sand. The wound was bandaged first. It hurt, but had to be tolerated. The wound wasn't dangerous, but I gave myself a shot of anesthetic just in case. I didn't touch the bodies. Couple of days and they'd be gone. There's a lot of dead people around here. I looked at the Toyota, but I couldn't find anything. 3 characters, all lying in the sand, no sign of life. Picked up the gun that had fallen out of the driver's hand, a Barrett 96 nice car. I stuffed the trophy with a full magazine behind my belly belt and walked to my car. Soon a bleak desert landscape stretched on both sides of the road. After 60 kilometers, some buildings appeared ahead. As I got closer, I realized that it was an old caravan shed, miraculously preserved. I drove leisurely under the archway and found myself in the courtyard, where in the center there was once a small fountain with water. I got out of the car and walked under the shade. One of the arches, there were no people in sight. If they were hiding from the burning of the driving sun inside. But the yard was well maintained, and in places the wall where it needed it, or had chipped away. Someone had reapplied fresh clay, and that had dried quickly under the pressure of the fierce light. I looked around the buildings, but there were no people. Maybe no one lives here all the time. Maybe they come here once in a while. The question is, why? As an inn, these buildings themselves, and lived in one of the rooms. I found a few antique jugs, mostly Latin, but there were a couple of silver ones. I threw them in the car. We had to drive to get into the valley by daylight. Finally, the road bumped into the mountains. It meandered between the rocks until it popped out to George's more often than not a mountain stream. It was getting cooler. Instead of sheep, trees appeared along the road. I realized I had reached my goal. An hour later, I entered a small village. But there was electricity and, most importantly, a bazaar. That's where I was going tomorrow morning. I stayed in a small hotel with the proud name of hotel. The room had a shower and a toilet. What more could a companion ask for? I ate some leftover rations and went to bed. The road had washed me clean. The trip turned out to be more than successful. In addition to the order itself, I had purchased something for myself. A day later, I filled 2 more cans of gasoline in the car and headed back. I had to spend the night on the road again, but everything was calm. By the end of the second day, I was pulling into Jack's yard. He did not meet me empty-handed either. I gave him everything I'd brought. The delivery of the shipment was not my concern. It was handled by specially trained men. When I told Jack about my adventures, he faltered his tongue for a long time, expressing either approval or condemnation of my frivolity. Then we drank some chaka, and I went to bed. After spending the night in Camille's arms, I went to the airport in the morning, accompanied by a friend. I didn't say goodbye myself. As they say, long farewells are tears. I had with me a few coins and a couple of funny souvenirs that I found in an abandoned caravanserai. We hugged in silence. I could see the mute question in Jack's eyes, and I knew how much I liked her. But I am a vagabond, a wanderer in life. So it's better to be without a family for now. I shook the hand held out to me firmly. I thought for a moment and took off my talisman, given by my grandfather, and gave it to Jack. Give it to Mina as a souvenir. My hometown met me with cold wind and nasty spring rain. A sharp contrast to the places I flew from. No one greeted me because I hadn't informed anyone I was coming. I picked up my car in the underground parking lot and took my time dragging home. In the 2 weeks I'd been gone, the snow had almost melted, leaving a pile of black mud along the sides of the highway, overnight freezing. And now the car almost slid on the ice, dispersing the water. The wipers rhythmically swept the raindrops, the light glass. I smoked, letting out the blue smoke through the open window. I felt dreary. Too many women had been around me lately. But for some reason, the memory of the last one resonated in my soul. Camille, yes, she was the one who had captured my heart. But alas, I'll never meet her again. Jack will probably marry her off to some respectable gentleman. I can only wish her happiness. An hour later, I was on the ring road, and a short time later, I was pulling up in front of my house. When I tried to open the front gate, the key didn't work. That's odd. I had recently changed the lock, and everything was perfect. I got out of the car and pressed the intercom button. I was tired on the road, and now I wanted to drink whiskey and sleep. "What do you want?" An unfamiliar male voice answered me. I was even a little taken aback. "I need to get into the house in some stupid way," I said. A minute later, the wicket was in the opening, stood some middle-aged man. "What do you want?" "The owners are still asleep. Get out of here." He tried to slam the wicket in my face, but my brain went into automatic mode, and I came to my senses when the guard flew aside, hitting his head on the brick fence. Yeah, you can't beat skill. I carefully stepped over the man's legs stretched across the path and headed for the front entrance. The glass door was unlocked. I made my way into the hallway and carefully set my bag down beside the couch. I wondered what the other owners were like. I hadn't rented or sold the house. Maybe Adriana and her monkeys had shown up again. I wasn't angry. I was just surprised. Went into the kitchen. Fridge is mine, but someone else's tea set is too bright. I don't like those. Opened the cupboard. The dishes were a mix of mine and someone else's, but only porcelain antique Latin, which looked so beautiful, was not behind the glass. I made coffee and went back to the hall. I should have waited for these owners to wake up. I must have dozed off, because I didn't hear the man enter the hall. "Who the hell are you?" A loud voice woke me up. Above me, an awning rolled in my eyes in surprise. A man in a green from class robe. Next to me stood an unfamiliar young woman and long fingers with blood-red nails frantically typing something on her iPhone. "Actually, I'm in my house," I said loudly. "Who are you?" "Who to?" "We bought this house and moved in 3 days ago. The owner and her child went to her husband up north and sold the house to us." The man was seething with righteous anger. "The owner is a young woman named Betty, and the girl's name is Christina, about 4 years old." I was beginning to realize what had happened. Betty had tears in her eyes at the airport. "Come back soon." And she tried to slip me a baby. That was a quick turnaround. It was so banal, it made me laugh. They say you shouldn't let strangers into your home. I imagine she got lost getting ready with the money. I, without getting into an argument, went into the study, pushed aside the painting hanging on the wall, opened the door of the secret safe, and took out the documents for the house. "Here, read. The house has one owner, and I'm not married. I'll give you 1 hour to get out of here. I'm getting tired of this, and put the dishes back where they belong. We bought this house. We're not going anywhere. You get out. If you have a problem with it, sue me. The guy was practically yelling, "Girl, call the police." Well, God knows, I did the best I could. I stood up and grabbed the man's nose with my right hand, didn't give him a second thought, threw him out the unlocked door into the street while splashing in the rain. Trying to get up, I walked over to my wife, shooed her away. Without ceremony, the woman nimbly jumped outside. She jumped up to her husband and tried to help him up. I didn't feel sorry for them. From the looks of it, the guys aren't poor, somehow stomping around. While we were stomping around the house, a police car pulled up. Really, they got a pimply sergeant on me. The pimply sergeant even punched me in the stomach a couple times. Consolidating their success, the policemen cheerfully dragged me to the car. Shouting something joyfully into the radio station. At the station, I showed my house papers to some important official in civilian clothes. He read the papers for a long time, moving his lips funny, then sighed. "This is a matter for the court to decide. You had no right to throw the present owners out of the house and to engage in violence." I didn't comment on his words and asked to make the phone call I was legally obliged to make. I quickly dialed the number on the other end of the wire, listened attentively, and was disconnected about half an hour later. The door to the office opened with a bang, hitting the wall. The boss sitting across from me jumped in surprise. The body of a man in a Kremlin suit floated into the office. He looked around the room and said, "Joseph." "Joe, I'm Mr. Smith's attorney." The man wagged his chin in my direction. "On what grounds is my client detained?" He tried to forcibly remove him. The warden started babbling, but the lawyer wouldn't let him finish. "My client is the legal owner of the house. It's documented." The lawyer's voice completely filled the office. "Mr. Smith does not have to prove what is already obvious. You are required to release my client immediately." But he beat the victim. The warden tried to interject. "The victim here is Mr. Smith. The men who tried to take possession of his house must leave immediately. And may Mr. Smith pray to God that Mr. Smith does not sue them for the theft of his property." The lawyer waved some paper like a flag. "You're to send a squad immediately and clear the house of invaders." Yeah, specialist, I thought. He should be at the UN. As I left the station, accompanied by my lawyer and a police captain, I saw a familiar pimply-faced sergeant standing by the car. "Just a minute, gentlemen, a little matter." I walked up to the sergeant and knocked him out with a straight punch to the jaw. As he fell, his head hit the side of the police car. His cap rolled off to the side. When I turned around, rubbing my bruised long arm, the lawyer and the captain were looking the other way. The music rolled in waves, almost knocking me off my feet. I sat at the bar and spit my third glass into myself. The bartender looked at me sympathetically. His eyes felt like they were screaming. I also nodded. Suddenly, the mirrored shelves reflected to the point of pain. A familiar face. I even sobered up. "Kathy, was it?" I turned around quickly. A lanky, foreign-looking man was standing next to her, hugging her by the waist. To be honest, I was a little confused. Kathy hadn't seen me, and I decided not to rush to her at once. Something told me I should wait. I turned to Bardeen. He nodded understandingly. He seemed to have seen my ruse. I slowly pulled up my whiskey, trying to follow the couple's maneuver with my eyes. As far as I could see, Kathy was dressed in an expensive outfit. Around her neck dangled a not-so-expensive gold necklace with pants. I'm an antique dealer, and I know what I'm looking at. Paying attention, apparently. My ex-lovers got it all together. Then why is her daughter Christina's baby not with her, but with Swindler and Betty? That's weird. If everything's fine, why doesn't Kathy take her? Or is it just not her baby? The con artist needed the girl to scam me, to make me feel sorry for her, so to speak. This is crazy. All these thoughts were heavy, collectively expressed in my alcohol-soaked head. I couldn't even decide whether to approach Kathy or not. What if she's with Betty? The music suddenly stopped, leaving my ears ringing. I looked at the glass display case of bottles. Kathy wasn't reflected there. which meant they were seated at a table. I cautiously turned around. Sure enough, there they were, sitting in the alcove near the table where Kathy and her boyfriend were sitting. The young woman leaned over and said something to her beau. He got up and walked toward the restrooms. I get it. It's now or never. Hello, my love, I spoke softly, but Kathy heard me perfectly well. You can sit down. Kathy stared at me for a while, stunned, then nodded nervously and looked around, searching for her companion with her eyes. How are you? How are you doing? In a calm voice, I asked. She obviously didn't know what to talk to me about. How's your daughter doing? Have you picked her up from her friend yet? Softly, I asked. What daughter? I don't have any children. Go away. My husband will be right back. Kathy looked around confused again. Who's Christina? I started shopping. Who's Christina? Leave me alone. Kathy blushed. My beloved has not greeted me kindly. And this is the man I've been dreaming of all these years. Although, on the other hand, I probably made up my own fairy tale of unearthly love. Kathy doesn't owe me anything. Suddenly, I was disgusted. I was about to get up when suddenly someone grabbed me from behind by the collar, and I could see Kathy's pupils dilate with fear. I was thrown off the chair and fell, hitting my head on the floor. While I was trying to figure out what was going on, I got a solid kick in the right side of my leg, even though I was drunk. But my reflexes worked, and I managed to regroup. A serious man at Kathy's, only jealous and bad jealous, wanted to kick me again, but I managed to grab him and yank him toward me. The man collapsed to the floor, pulling down the tablecloth and dishes at the same time. Now there were two of us on the floor, not so lonely anymore, but it was time to do the honors. I got up as quickly as I could and staggered to the exit, passing the bar. In the glass window, I saw a jealous woodpecker rushing after me. To be honest, I was getting pretty tired of fighting with him. I let him get closer. Then I took a step to the right, and with a U-turn punched him in the eye, jealously collapsed on his back, obediently headbutting the steps of the small staircase leading to the locker room. At that moment, the music roared and his pitiful squeak was drowned in maddening decibels. But why did I keep getting beaten up? I was feeling so myself. It was a shame that I even brushed away the tear-stained cheeks. I stood in the bathroom and looked at myself sympathetically in the mirror. No one to even feel sorry for me. On the cab ride home, I sobered up a little. And that's not good. I went to the kitchen, took a bottle out of the cabinet, and fell on my favorite couch with relief. Suddenly, I realized I wasn't alone in the house. Raising my head, saw in the semi-darkness of the hall, calmly sitting in a chair, a not young man. Asked in my temples how he had gotten here. It was the first thing that came to my mind. This place is like a back alley. It's not good to drink alone. Suddenly, the unexpected guest spoke. He took out a Chechen telescope from his coat pocket, a plastic cup, and with a sharp movement of his hand, put it on alert. I can bring a glass one. Uncertainly muttered I. No need. The man understood everything. I poured the whiskey, and we drank in silence. What's good in it? The guest frowned. Worse than our moonshine. We were silent for a while. Until the man got down to business. You had a very productive trip to Central Asia. The client was very pleased. He lit a thin cigarette without asking permission. But you will have to go back to those places again. I looked at the guest questioningly. There is a little business very well paid. The man let out a thin line of smoke from his mouth. Silver again? I asked gradually, coming to my senses. No, not silver. I know about your adventures in the Red Sands. The guest looked for an ashtray. The one where you encountered the elusive worm. Your story impressed a very rich man to such an extent that he got the idea to get the trophy. I almost choked, but I haven't seen it. That's just a guess. I was surprised beyond belief. So figure out what it was, mystical or real. The guest is standing up. The fee will be. He said such a sum that my eyes went black. When do I have to go? The thirst for profit threw away all doubts. For that kind of money, I was ready to walk to Central Asia. A man you know well will contact you. He will give you the necessary instructions, help you with equipment and necessary outfit. When will he contact me? Take your time. All in good time. The guest began to button his coat. Just a moment. I have a favor to ask of you. I'm up to. Yes, sir. The guest looked at me curiously. I told him about the recent events in my house and my assumptions about the people involved. The man listened to me and asked, "And what do you want?" "To take money from the crooks." "No, it's not my money. You can keep it as a fee." I looked my guest straight in the eye. "I'm interested in the child. Who is he, and where is he now? It's ungodly to give a girl hope and then give it back." "All right. I understand you." The guest didn't let me finish. "What to do with the crooks?" "At your discretion," I said. The man turned and disappeared behind the front door. As of recently, I have a vintage radio waves in my office, a Minsk 61, made back in the 1950s. I took the receiver away from my mom when she persistently started complaining about the glut of old junk. There's a beautiful lamp in Rodion in working order. It had been bought by my grandfather, so it came to me as a sort of inheritance. It now stood on the vintage pedestals to the left of the table and delighted the eye with its perfect forms. Yes, people knew how to make good things in their time. Time flies fast. Already the radios of the 60s are becoming antiques. What's up with receivers, equipment from the 70s and 80s? Now in the antique trend, I am very often approached by fans of tape recorders of the late 80s of the last century. Ask already, and seeing the equipment of the early 90s, VCRs, analog camcorders, tape recorders. Even 30 years ago, we used this equipment, believing that it could not be better. And now it's gone vintage. Turntables are probably next. Apparently, every generation sooner or later starts to feel nostalgic for a bygone time, and maybe even without realizing it, looking for things that can at least for a while bring them back to their past. To be honest, vintage radio equipment is not my profile. But more and more often, I started to think about opening a special department in my store dedicated to this topic. For some reason, it seems to me that this direction of antique business is very promising. I cozily settled in an armchair, pulled out of the bowels of the table, typing a bottle of Jameson and Nakatala, a 2-finger glass of the amber beverage. What to do? There was no question. If there is a Rodiona, one should listen to her. I looked out the window. It was snowing, which is not quite typical for April. Large snowflakes were beating against the window like frozen butterflies, trying to make their way to the hot cabinet. I felt cold, and I stood up and closed the window. A toggle switch clicked. The settings dial lit up cheerfully. I remembered how in my distant childhood, including Rodiona, I had felt inexpressible excitement. One inscriptions on the school at the construction site were worth what? Tirana, Prague, Moscow, Ljubljana, Berlin. The names of unfamiliar cities sounded to me like a pass to an unknown world, and the announcers, broadcasting in unfamiliar languages, seemed to me good wizards, counting their spells. I pressed the DV key for about 30 years now. Almost no one broadcasts on the long and medium waves. Once the bands were bursting with the number of stations. Today they are silent with occasional crackles and sounds that are not dickish. Finally, the melody of a sentimental French Schlager of the 60s poured out of the speaker. It was a wonderful time for girls with natural breasts, rubber band stockings, short skirts, spyglasses barely covering, and panties. I even clutched at the nostalgic memories, clearly picturing a time I knew only from old magazines and movies. The French chanteuse was replaced by an upbeat Chuck Berry hit. Women are bloodthirsty cats, but it's boring without them. Chuck assured me. Yeah, boring as hell. I thought about it and decided to take a closer look at the things I'd brought back from my last trip. I took 2 packages out of the desk drawer and laid them out neatly in front of me. One of them contained an antique dagger with a handle covered in silver and worn from time. When I pulled it out of its sheath, the weapon fell into my hand as if it had flown in. It seemed as if it had been made especially for me. In the other surtout was a small figure of a cat-like beast made of unknown material. It was probably carved from stone and covered with bronze paint. Its muzzle with an open mouth looked very spectacular. In the eyes of the predator were skillfully inserted black amethysts, a very rare variety of this semi-precious stone. The finest carvings, hundreds of tiny touches, all of which made the sculpture of the beast almost lifelike. Half-bent, back paws, pinned ears curved like a spring spine. It seemed as if the predator was about to deliver a swift death blow to the head of the raptor. A blood-red ruby was inserted, which seemed to set off the beastly nature of the figure. I wish I knew how this masterpiece ended up in a dilapidated caravan shed. I set the figurine on the stone shelf and put the dagger in the table. Maybe someday I'll hang an antique handmade rug in my study and place an antique weapon on it. As I drifted off to sleep, it seemed to me that the beast on the mantelpiece was ravenously removing the treasure with its teeth. The next morning I received a text message with the address. I scribbled it into my notebook, knowing the message would be gone in a minute. I took a long smoke, settling my gaze into the wall. Well, nothing teaches me anything. My life is always getting in the wrong way and always ends, as usual, with black ingratitude and hatred. And I'm going to hang on to a burden that I'll have to carry for the rest of my life. And on the other hand, there's no other hand. What's that girl to me? Who is she to me? You can't save and warm everyone. So that's her fate, and there's nothing I can do about it. Besides, where am I supposed to put her? I live alone, and I don't have any babysitters. I'm relieved. I finally made the right decision. In my life, I've learned one thing very clearly. Most women, regardless of age, are monstrously ungrateful. My car was traveling down a dirt road, periodically dived into shallow puddles, breaking the wheels, thin ice. It had been freezing since the night before, but it was already clear that spring has won the tedious winter. In an hour, the sun would warm up, and the ice would melt, and the road would turn into impassable swamps. Soon a one-storied barrack, with the walls eared from time and rain, appeared from the turn. I pushed open the shaky doors and stepped into the dark hallway. It looked like the structure was uninhabited, but judging by the voices carrying all from one of the rooms, there were people here. I approached the lantern door, leading into one of the rooms, and without removing my gloves, I turned the knob. The odor of rot and cigarette smoke hit my nostrils. Across from the entrance, a table was piled with smoke, leftovers, and empty bottles. Dropped his head on his folded hands, sat half-undressed woman, two men homeless. They were arguing loudly about something. When I opened the door, all these picturesque characters stared at me in amazement. Even the woman with difficulty, but raised her head. "What do you want?" Coughing, one of the men in a dirty dress dressed on a naked body. "Where is the girl?" Trying not to breathe the unbearable stench, I asked loudly, "Was Christina here yesterday?" The uncle seemed to have a bad hangover. He pushed the woman. "Hey, what's up? Where's the girl? What do you need her for?" Missed the woman, looking at me, swollen with lice from drunken eyes. I ignored her question. On the iron bed against the opposite wall, did someone stir? One of the men nodded at the pile of filthy crap. Here she crawled out from under the rags. She didn't even have the strength to cry. Probably those bastards hadn't fed her lately. I gently lifted the girl up, and she, like a kitten, trustingly nuzzled her nose into my coat. "Leave it." The woman tried to get up, but her legs wouldn't hold her, and she fell back on the stool. "I'm taking the girl." I honestly didn't care who Christina was. "What do you mean?" "I'm taking her." The first man reacted. "We fed her, clothed her, raised her, for nothing." I threw some bills on the table. "That's enough." It was visible how all the members of the collective's eyes flashed greedily. Dressing the child in a coat, I went out to the car, put the girl in the back seat. Asked, "Do you remember me?" She nodded.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Why are you getting so hot and bothered so early? Your Ethan won't get away from you. Aren't you afraid he'll turn to her? He'll find out sooner or later. Do you think Kathy will stay with you? I doubt it. We'd both be fools. What am I supposed to do then? Drown myself? Why should I live without him? Wait, drown yourself. Daniel thought for a moment. There must be a way out. There is. Olivia lowered her voice to a whisper, looking around. And you'll go all the way out? What do you want in return? Olivia wiped away her tears. Nothing. If this case works out, we both win. I get rid of the problem, Kathy stays with me, and we can raise our children happily. And you get what you want, and you get to keep your marriage. Also make sure I never see you again or hear from you or your husband. You don't have to worry about that. Just how do I get it all to happen without being seen? I'm sure we can do it. The woman has regained her spirits. What am I supposed to do there? A class reunion. Kathy pondered, trying on one dress after another in front of the mirror. It's been 5 years since we last saw each other. They'll start reminiscing again, telling stories from their school life for the 105th time and laughing at them. Why? This is probably the best one. She decided on a strict dark blue dress made of a thin, shiny fabric. The woman pulled a matching scarf from her dresser drawer and deftly tied it around her neck. She added earrings, a ring, shoes, a purse on a thin leather strap, and spun around in front of the mirror, assessing her reflection. Then she sat down abruptly on the edge of the bed and moaned. I'm afraid to go there. I don't want to meet Ethan, and he'll be there. Lisa had warned me. Why rake up the past? And what's in the past? A youthful crush. But it's been years. Right. She jumped to her feet, tossing back the unruly locks of dark hair. I'm calm. I'm going to meet my classmates. All feelings are in the past. I just want to see the guys. Oh my God! She covered her face with her hands. Who am I trying to fool? The young woman flinched when she heard the phone ring. Kathy? The cheerful voice of a friend sounded. Kathy wrinkled her nose. Where are you? Everyone's packed. Get a cab. Come right away. Kathy didn't have time to answer as the phone buzzed, and she sighed, dialing the number of the cab. From the open windows of the cafe, music was pouring out. Former classmates were standing on the porch, smoking, talking, laughing. What are you celebrating? The driver asked, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. He smoothly stopped the car at the very entrance to the cafe. Homecoming. Kathy sighed. Have a good time. The driver smiled and stepped on the gas. Kathy paused for a second, gathering her strength, and walked towards her classmates. She was very worried. Her heart was racing. What had he become? She thought of Ethan. How will he meet me? She was scared and frantic to see him. The cafe was stuffy. Lisa rushed over and dragged her to the tables. I've been saving a seat for you. Sit down and have a drink. Kathy warmly greeted her classmates, exchanged a few duty phrases, but her gaze involuntarily slid around the hall in search of the one who made her poor heart flutter. He's not here yet, joyfully informed her friend. Who? Kathy asked, blushing. Ethan. You're looking for him, aren't you? I'm not looking for anyone. I'm not looking for anyone. I'm not interested in him at all. At these words, Lisa laughed and shook her head. It's stuffy in here. Shall we go and get some air? She headed for the exit, followed by the others. They stood on the porch of the cafe, exchanging meaningless phrases. Oh, girls! One of them was surprised. Who is it that drove up in such an expensive car? I don't believe it. Kathy turned her head and saw a big black Jeep, which dashingly drove up and stood in the parking lot. Holy cow! The other girl noticed. It's Ethan himself. The girls were talking animatedly, and Kathy's heart raced when she saw a tall, broad-shouldered, handsome brunette in a light business suit and model shoes, smiling and spreading his arms wide, walking toward them. A man can't be so handsome. Someone laughed. A rich groom. Do you know if he is married? Asked the first beauty of their class. When has having a wife ever stopped you? The girls laughed. I don't know anything about him at all. He may be a father of many children. The first dance with me, please do not borrow. As they exchanged jokes, the girls ran off the porch and into Ethan's arms. Hello, Kathy. Ethan smiled broadly at the girl. He hugged her and kissed her cheek. Hello, Ethan. The girl trembled at his touch. Goosebumps ran down her body, and she blushed, embarrassed by his proximity. Why are you so excited? She scolded herself. It was just a kiss between former classmates and nothing more. But she realized that nothing had been forgotten. She was still attracted to him. Pearls, Ethan proclaimed cheerfully, looking around at everyone. You're so beautiful, come on. I want to drink to you. The girls, laughing, followed the young man into the hall, each wanting to be closer to him. Well, what are you doing like you're not alive? Looked back at Kathy, friend. Catch up. I'm coming. The girl sighed and went into the hall. The evening was a great success. The young people were having a lot of fun. Kathy's heart sank when her gaze happened to meet Ethan's. He talked to everyone evenly, not singling out anyone for attention. What are you, like a taut string? Her friend interrupted her. Distracted, relax, drink champagne, smile. Everything is great. Let's go dancing. Stop sitting around the table. Lisa dragged Kathy into the circle as light music began to play. Kathy made an effort to put on a smile, and Ethan was right there. Kathy, I don't recognize you. He shouted in her ear, the loud music making it hard to talk. You're even more beautiful now. I've been thinking about you. He pressed his lips to her cheek for a moment. Kathy was silent, her heart ready to jump out of her chest at the light touch, the skin on her cheek burning. She felt a silly smile spread across her face against her will, but she couldn't help it. She wanted to be with him like this all night, dancing in the darkened room. A slow tune began to play. Would you like to dance with me? Taking her hand, Ethan asked. No, Kathy breathed out, her legs shaking as she felt his hands on her waist. She felt his hands on her waist and winced when he leaned over and kissed her cheek or temple, or pressed her against him, or leaned away from her and stared at her in admiration. The girl didn't notice how jealously her classmates were watching them. Ethan still has a crush on you. Playfully, Lisa remarked as Kathy returned to her table. Don't make that up. The girl blushed. It's just a dance. Friends, announced the host of the party. Our evening has come to an end. I say goodbye to you and wish to meet in the same composition in the next 5 years. School years have passed imperceptibly, leaving an eternal trace in your memory. And no matter how much time passes, I hope you will remember each other. Goodbye. The guests slowly began to disperse. Someone, having said goodbye, left alone. Someone had already found a company to continue the evening elsewhere. Kathy shuddered as she heard Ethan's voice behind her. Can I walk you out? Why? She was surprised. I don't live far away, and how would you do it? You can't drive when you're drunk. We'll walk. The car is parked at the cafe until morning. Nothing will happen to it. Shall we go to the embankment? I don't want to part with you. Don't say no. He took her hand, pressed it to his chest. When else can we be alone like this? All right. Kathy gave in. Her sixth sense was chiming in, warning her not to accept the invitation, but she didn't heed it. A long-standing crush drowned out all reason. Why do you need a backpack? Ethan pulled the backpack out of the car and slung it over one shoulder. I think we could use it. Smiling enigmatically, Ethan said. They walked slowly down the embankment. Even silent next to Ethan, Kathy felt good. Let's go down to the river, shall we? The young man suggested when they came to a staircase that led down to a narrow strip of beach. Remember when we could sit here until morning and make out? He gave her a hand, helping her down. There under the bridge was their hiding place, protected by the concrete slabs of the boardwalk and the base of the stairs. We were teenagers, chilly. Kathy shivered in the fresh river wind. I'll warm you up. I've got this. Ethan solemnly pulled out of his backpack a blanket, a bottle of champagne, 2 glasses, and a box of chocolates. Remember when we used to sit here like this after the last exam at school and drink champagne? So much water has passed. Thoughtfully answered the girl, sitting down on the carefully confused plaid. I remember almost nothing. Why are you deceiving yourself? The young man deftly opened the bottle, poured the drink, and handed one glass to the girl. I see that you remember everything perfectly and have not forgotten how we loved each other. Don't flatter yourself. She took a sip of champagne. Then we were children. Today we are different. I couldn't have been wrong. Ethan said heartfelt, taking the glass from her. Look at me. He turned her toward him. The same look, the same feelings. He kissed her lips lightly. I realized today that I missed you, our conversations in front of the moon. He kissed her again, making her lose the remnants of her mind. You said it right. We are different. You are a woman. I am a man. We are attracted to each other. Why can't we give you pleasure? Ethan put his arms around her, laid her down on the plaid, and began to cover her face with hot kisses. Kathy hardly remembered how she had found herself unclothed in front of him, embarrassed by the intense, greedy gaze. I want you. He looked at her questioningly, as if asking permission. Yes, with one lip, the girl answered. They made love, and in between they drank champagne. Heated, tired, they lay side by side, open to the night sky, warm June air, and admired the awakening of a new day. I'm ready to spend my whole life with this man. Kathy dreamed, snuggled against Ethan's warm side. We'll have a big house and 3 wonderful children. He's so handsome. The girl rolled over onto her stomach and looked at the man affectionately. I love you. I still love you. You are the only man in my life. I am grateful to you for that. I didn't expect it, honestly. I thought you got married a long time ago. I've been faithful to you. I didn't meet someone who could help me forget about us, but things will be different now. That class reunion turned my life upside down. I realized I didn't need anyone else. I wish I could take it back, but I won't let you go anywhere else. You're mine. She pressed passionately against the man's naked body. Listen, Kathy. Releasing himself from her embrace, Ethan sat up. There's something I need to tell you. Tell me. The girl closed her eyes dreamily. I'm ready to listen to your voice from morning till night. Forgive me. I realize I've treated you like an asshole, but I'm married, and I'm about to have a child. A satisfied smile slowly slid off the girl's face. She didn't immediately realize what he had said. Married how? Well, married. I've been happily married for 5 years. I respect you very much and am grateful for tonight, but there will be no affair between us. Then why are you here? It's my fault, I admit it. Everything that happened between us is a mistake. I couldn't resist the temptation, the wine, the night, the beautiful woman, the memories of my youth. Anyone would, but that's it. Walk me home, asked Kathy, hurriedly getting dressed. She was disgusted with herself. Did you take offense? Ethan stood up, starting to get dressed as well. We're adults. We had a good time. Admit it, you had a good time with me. But it was a mistake. Muffled, Kathy replied. Her heart was torn apart. In 1 minute, all her dreams had been shattered. She berated herself, cursed her gullibility, and wanted to get home so she could get under the shower, washed herself off his kisses, his touch. At home, standing under the hot water, she cried she had never felt so bad. Kathy went to bed and couldn't sleep for a long time. How could he have done that to her? Daughter? Kathy heard. Come to dinner. I've cooked some fish, just the way you like it. You should eat well. You've been so pale lately. Kathy went into the kitchen, inhaled the smell of fried fish with pleasure, and suddenly clamped her hands over her mouth, only just managed to run to the toilet before she threw up. Then she stood in the bathroom for a long time, leaning over the sink, trying to cope with the spasms that came to her throat. Her hands, her legs were shaking, and her already pale face was waxy. Kathy, are you pregnant? Looking suspiciously at her daughter, Wendy asked. Yes, Mom. Hiding her eyes, the young woman admitted. That's good. Rejoiced the mother. Have you told Daniel yet? What's Daniel got to do with it? Kathy asked tiredly. It's not his baby. How could it be? Wendy stared at her in bewilderment. Who is it from? Really? It suddenly hit her. Did Ethan knock you up? You shameless girl. Did it all work out at your high school reunion? You cheated on a guy like that. Are you going to chase after Ethan like a dog again? Didn't he get on your nerves enough in high school? Even so, I love him and I don't want your Daniel. And he's ready to marry you. No, he's married. His wife's expecting a baby. I won't break up a family. I don't have the right to do that. And you keep quiet. Does he have the right to break up your life? Who'd want you with a baby? Have you thought about it? What will people say? You're stupid. You're in your 3rd decade, and you're still smart. Calm down, Mom. Kathy wrinkled her nose. I'll pick up the baby myself. Kathy. Wendy sat down beside her daughter and took her hand in her own. And you marry Daniel. Say it's his baby. It's not due yet. No one will know but us. Don't make it up. The woman snatched her hand out of her mother's grasp. I'm not going to start my family life with deceit. Daniel is not a fool. He will suspect a lie, because we have not been intimate. No. Mother spoke with determination. I won't leave it like this. He must answer for everything. Mom, don't you try to calm down. Your mom, unfortunately, cannot help. The blood clot has broken off, and this is instant death. We got there, but it was too late. Is that how it happens? In despair, looking at the nurse, asked Kathy, swallowing tears. She'd just been talking, laughing. It happens. I can call someone to come and support you. You shouldn't be alone right now. Yeah, I'll make the call. With unresponsive fingers, she dialed Daniel's number. He arrived almost immediately. What happened? The man stepped aside to let the strangers who were carrying Wendy's body out of the driveway. Yes, the woman was dead. One of them answered, Daniel. Kathy rushed towards him. Mommy's gone. She snuggled into his shoulder and sobbed. Will you stay with her? Asked the doctor. Yes, Daniel answered, hugging the inconsolable Kathy. We gave her a sedative. She should sleep and come back tomorrow to do the paperwork. Later, Kathy could hardly recall the events of the following days. Daniel had taken care of all the troubles. He supported the young woman, was always by her side, organized the funeral and the wake. Kathy did not understand what was happening. She felt in a kind of prostration. On the day of the funeral, when everything was over, the young people were left alone in an empty apartment. "Daniel, thank you." The woman looked at him gratefully. "If it hadn't been for you, I don't know how I would have coped. It all came at once. Do you want me to stay with you?" "Yeah, I can't be here alone. I know I have to get used to it, but I can't yet. It's so empty without my mom." Tears came to her eyes, and she looked at the picture of Windus with the black stripe on the frame, but Daniel pulled her to him, hugged her. "Don't cry. I'm with you. I'm here for you." They stayed like that all night, hugging each other, falling asleep and unnoticed. "Let's go for a walk?" Daniel suggested at breakfast. "You need a little distraction." "I don't want to." Picking at her plate with her fork, Kathy replied, "I don't want to see anyone right now." The man looked at her affectionately. "That's what happens when people leave. We're all guests on this earth. We all have to go sometime. Wendy's gone, but we're still alive. Who's going to feel better if you sit alone all day? Do you want to get sick? Mom wouldn't praise you for that. Come on, pull yourself together. You don't understand." Kathy said in despair. "We'd had a fight with her. I yelled at her, and then she got sick. It's my fault she's dead. Our quarrel triggered the seizure." "Don't talk nonsense." Daniel frowned. "You read the report? The clot broke off. It could have broken off earlier, it could have broken off later, but it would have happened anyway. There's no way to control it. What's the point of blaming yourself for something that's not your fault? You're so good." Kathy looked at him gratefully. Daniel had surrounded Kathy with such care and attention that she felt involuntarily attracted to him. "Kathy." One evening the man confessed, "Do you know how much I love you? My love is enough for the two of us. You're alone and I'm alone, marry me." "Daniel, I'm very good to you." The woman raised her eyes to him. "And of course I'm ready to marry you, but before I do, I want to confess something." She was silent for a moment, gathering the strength to make her confession. The man looked at her with a smile. "Daniel, I'm pregnant." "What?" He tensed. Kathy could see his cheekbones set. "Who's the lucky guy?" "That's Ethan, my classmate. I could hide the pregnancy from you, but that wouldn't be fair. You've done so much for me these past few days, I just can't keep quiet. If you leave, I'll understand. I love you too much." After a long silence, Daniel spoke. "That's why I'll take your child as my own. I'll never reproach you with a word or a look, I swear. I just want to be with you always, but I have a favor to ask. Don't ever tell anyone it's not my baby. Promise?" "I promise." "Daniel, I don't know how I deserve this kind of love. Thank you for being there for me. I couldn't have done it without your support. So much has happened, so many changes in my life. I've lost my way. I really need you." Kathy said, and she believed her words to be true, "So you'll marry me?" "I think we're in too much of a hurry. Mama's just been buried. What kind of wedding can we have? We'll get married in a year." Daniel said sensibly, "In the meantime, we can have a quiet marriage. You don't want the baby to be born fatherless, do you?" The last argument finally dispelled Kathy's doubts, and she agreed. A couple months later, they were husband and wife. The woman's pregnancy had been difficult, and she hadn't left the hospital in months. During the night, Kathy woke up to a sudden twisting in her stomach. The sharp pain made her cry out. "What happened?" Daniel asked sleepily, waking up immediately. He turned on the light and saw his wife's pale face contorted with pain. "Has it started?" "Yes." Barely catching her breath, Kathy replied. "Hang on, I'll call an ambulance. And you breathe, breathe." He quickly dialed a phone number and called the medical team. "Can I help you get dressed?" "I don't feel well," the woman complained. "Don't be afraid, my dear. Everything is under control. We'll take you to the hospital and the doctors will help you there." Daniel quickly dressed himself, collected his wife, and put out the bag he had already prepared for the hospital. When he heard the doorbell ring, he rushed to open it. "Where is the woman in labor?" Entering, the doctor asked businesslike, "Something you pale. Can you walk?" "I'll try." Daniel helped his wife up. "Ouch!" Kathy cried out, writhing in pain and clutching her stomach. "Stretcher!" shouted the doctor. A stretcher appeared, and the woman was laid down and carried into the car. "Doctor?" asked a worried Daniel. "Is she going to be all right?" "Don't worry, Daddy. She'll be fine." The car drove off, and Daniel went to the hospital after it. "Where's my wife?" he asked the girl nurse in the emergency room. They took her to the delivery room. "You're going home. There's nothing you can do for her now." "No, I'm staying." The man sat down in a vacant chair. He couldn't find a place to sit. He stood up, paced the hallway, trying to pull himself together. "Are you Kathy's husband?" The doctor came out of the door. "Yes," rushed over to him, a worried man. "Your wife's unconscious right now, and the labor's severe. You must authorize a C-section. Unfortunately, she can't. I don't want to live without my boy. Where is he? I want to see him." She sat up abruptly in bed and looked at her husband with distraught eyes. "Let me hold him in my arms." "Calm down." Daniel looked at her anxiously. "You're not yourself right now. I buried our child. You don't understand." The woman clutched at his arm. "I want to see him. Let's go to the cemetery and open the grave. I'll only look at him with one eye. I want to memorize his face at least. Please, please." Tears were streaming from her eyes. Her lips trembled. She was shivering. "Nurse." Daniel ran out into the hallway. My wife was hysterical. A nurse came running, followed by the doctor. Sobbing Kathy, they put her in bed, gave her an injection. She burst out, screaming, begging for the baby, her head throbbing on the pillow. After a while, the woman fell silent, sobbing pitifully, and then fell into a troubled sleep. "You go home," Daniel, the doctor, advised. "She'll sleep until morning. You'll have a hard time with her at first." "It's all right. I'll manage. It's a good thing she hasn't seen the baby. She'll forget sooner." But the doctor was wrong. Kathy didn't want to forget her baby. When she was discharged from the hospital 2 days later, the first thing she did was tell her husband to take her to the cemetery. There she fell on a small grave, wrapped her arms around it, and sobbed bitterly. "Olivia, I'm home." Ethan threw the suitcase at the threshold and went into the living room. "Where are you, darling?" "I'm back. I was so afraid I wouldn't make it back from my business trip in time for your delivery." "Here's our daddy back." Smiling Olivia came out of the room with the baby in her arms. The woman's eyes shone with happiness. "How? Already? Why didn't you tell me you were going to have a baby?" He frowned. "I would have come right away. I wanted to be there for the birth." "Sorry, our son didn't want to wait for you to come back. Won't you give me a kiss, darling? Don't you want to see our baby?" She handed the baby to his father. "How tiny he is," the man said, taking his son in his arms. He looked at the boy with fondness and tenderness, then kissed his wife. "Thank you, my love, but next time I'll never leave you alone before the birth." Ethan leaned over his son. He was so preoccupied with him that he didn't notice the shadow running across Olivia's face. "Why so sad, friend?" Lisa sat down across from Kathy at the cafe table. "What's wrong with you? Why are there tears in your eyes? Are you moping? I've been saying for ages, stop killing yourself over your firstborn for another. It's been a long time, and you still can't calm down. I wouldn't wait too long if I were you. Aren't you afraid your husband will leave you? He's such a good-looking man. He'll be hitched to some pretty girl before you know it. Did you go to the hospital?" "That's what I wanted to tell you. The doctors say I won't be able to have any more children." The woman said sadly, "The labor was hard, then complications, and that's it. I can't get pregnant again." "Is that the final verdict?" "Yes, I've had every cell examined, but the result is the same. I'm infertile." "Why, Daniel? Does he know?" "No, I don't dare tell him. I'm afraid to imagine his reaction. Do you think he'll leave you?" "I don't know. I don't care. I don't think I love him. After I lost the baby, he and I became like strangers. I don't see him much. He's got his own business. He's at work all day. I'm alone. Why do you live with him if you don't love him? It's a real hard labor. If I were you, I'd have gotten a divorce or a lover long ago." Lisa winked at her friend. "What are you talking about?" Kathy waved her away. "I couldn't even think of such a thing. I'm grateful to him for being there for me in my time of need. He's been there for me. He's been there for me. He's so good. He's easy and simple. He does everything for me. You can't get very far on gratitude. Are you really going to spend the rest of your life feeling indebted to him? Doesn't he know you don't love him? Aren't you afraid he'll find someone else to replace you? Look at what you've become like. You've completely neglected yourself, walking around like a shadow. Your husband's a businessman, and you're not groomed, wearing dark clothes. I can't remember the last time you smiled. I can't remember it myself." The woman sighed heavily. "The house is empty, no one to talk to. I don't know where Daniel gets his angelic patience from. Isn't it time to shake things up a bit? Why don't you and I go out and buy you some clothes? You're a young, beautiful woman. Don't you want to look stunning? If my husband allowed me not to save money on myself, I would have already collected a collection of clothes from the most expensive fashion designers. I'm happy with what I'm wearing. I'm not really in the mood for clothes right now. I'm sorry." Kathy got up from the table. "I should get going." "Don't wait. Tell Daniel the truth. He doesn't deserve to be treated like this." "That's exactly what I'm going to do now." "Thank you. You're the best friend in the world." The woman smiled sadly. With a heavy heart, Kathy waited for her husband's return from work. She realized that it was impossible to postpone the conversation and dreaded it. "Darling, I'm back." Daniel entered the living room with a small but very expensive bouquet of flowers. "I thought I'd treat you a little." He answered his wife's puzzled look, holding out the flowers. Just like that, no reason. "Come on, feed me." "Daniel." The woman put the bouquet in a vase and began to set the table. "I need to have a serious talk with you." "Can we save the serious talk for after dinner? I'm really tired." "Your talk, can it wait half an hour?" Kathy watched her husband eat in silence. He said something, even laughed, but the woman, immersed in her own thoughts, did not listen to him. "Kathy, was there something you wanted to talk about?" "Yes." Kathy woke up from her thoughts. "I went to the doctor again today, and I got the final report. I'll never be able to have any more children." "Is that definite yet?" Daniel frowned. "Yes, they didn't give me even 1% out of 100 that a miracle would happen, and I could get pregnant. I'm sorry. I'm a bad wife." Daniel got up, walked over to her, gave her a hug. "You're the best, so we'll live together. There are many families like us and nothing. They live, even happy in their own way. But you dreamed of an heir. I dreamed of you. The main thing is to have you by my side. That's all I need. What are you doing up at the crack of dawn?" Daniel asked, getting ready for work. "I'm going to visit my mother and son." Kathy replied as she dressed. "I haven't been there in 6 months, and the graves are overgrown with grass, so I need to clean them up." "Why do you go there? How many times can you nurse a wound? Live in the present. Take care of the house. You wouldn't understand." Kathy replied, "You haven't had him under your belly for 9 months. Do you think I'm callous? You think I've forgotten him? You're wrong. Maybe I suffer more than you, but I don't show it. What was it like for me, burying our little son? You're lucky you didn't even see him. You can't imagine how I felt at that moment. I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Kathy burst into tears. Daniel put his arms around her and held her tightly against him, comforting her. "I can't help it. I'm drawn to it like a magnet. Aren't you afraid you'll go crazy soon? What kind of person in their right mind behaves like that? I understand celebrating an anniversary, but not every month. You go there like you go to work. Why don't you do something useful or go out with your girlfriends? Why don't we make a reservation at a restaurant? We haven't been out in a while, or we could go to the countryside, you know? Sorry, I'm not in the mood. Should I lock you up? I can't stand to see you torturing yourself. Don't bother me, please. It's where I calm down." Kathy knew in her heart that her husband was right, but she was drawn to the last refuge of mother and son. She put on her household gloves, squatted by her mother's grave, and wiped the monument with a cloth. "It's been a long time since I've been to your place." The woman mumbled as she began to clean up the grass. She concentrated on pulling weeds and tried not to think about anything. "Well, it's good to be clean again. Now I'll go to my son, and you stay here. Hello, my darling." Kathy bent down to her son's grave. She threw the wilted flowers out of the vase and put fresh ones in. "You would have been 5 years old today." She stroked the black granite monument, shivering from the cold. "Mom remembers you. I'm sorry I didn't keep you safe. Sleep well." The woman stood silently by the small mound. From the outside she looked strange, all in black, thin, with a pale face, haggard with mental anguish. She looked much older than her years. The habit of speaking to the graves of mother and son in the cemetery, which had appeared in recent years, horrified Daniel. Time passed, and Kathy's mental health did not recover. Her life, like a metronome, monotonously, joylessly counted down the days. Her heart suffered from night dreams, which appeared to her if she did not come to her son for a long time. No, she could not even imagine the child's face, but from behind the vision was so clear that the woman woke up in tears, and in the morning went to the cemetery. Kathy, the woman heard one day, on her way out of the cemetery grounds. "Hello, have you come to see your people?" "Clara, hello." She greeted the older woman, Ethan's mother, warmly. "What brings you here?" "I buried my husband a year ago. I came to visit. I'm sorry, I didn't know Ethan's father had died. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you. If it wasn't for my grandson, I don't know how I'd have gotten through all this." "Olivia had a boy?" "Yeah, he's your age. You had a baby with her at the same time." "Yes." "I didn't know. Look what a nice little boy we have growing up." The woman took out of her purse a photo of a smiling 5-year-old boy and handed it to Kathy. "He's beautiful. And he's so smart. Ethan wasn't like that at his age." Kathy almost fainted when she saw the picture. Her heart raced, There was something painfully familiar in the boy's features. Tears came to her eyes. No, she thought, my baby would probably look like him, for he is Ethan's son too. Oh, Kathy! Clara came to her senses. I'm sorry, you stupid fool. I was so happy I forgot you'd lost your baby. Don't kill me like that. You and your husband are still young. You'll have a baby. Baby, it's such a happiness. Kathy smiled sadly at the woman and hurried away. She knew that she would never have this happiness. Olivia, where have you been again? Ethan grudgingly watched as his wife, smiling stupidly and looking at him with eyes dazed from alcohol, took off her shoes in the hallway. At the club, where else? Did you miss me, darling? Isn't it a little late for you to go clubbing? You're not a girl. Aren't you ashamed to insinuate my age? By the way, I'm still young. What's your problem anyway? I came home a little drunk, so what? I'm not a nursing mom. It's the middle of the night and you're out somewhere. The baby wouldn't go to bed without you. What's wrong? You can't put your own son to bed. Are you used to your wife always being home? And I wanted a party, I have the right. Couldn't you do without me for one night? You're a mother, didn't your heart pound? Didn't you worry about your son? And you're a father. Olivia parried. She came close to her husband and kissed him. He smelled the scent of expensive men's cologne and wine. The boy needs a father more than a mother. By the way, I didn't say that. I gave him to you. I raised him for 5 years. Now it's your turn. Why are you picking on me? She pouted her lips in resentment. Can't I have at least one night a year to relax the way I want to? I'm sick of diapers, cradles, baby tears. But that doesn't mean you have to come home at midnight. Well, I'm sorry. I wasn't looking at my watch. It was so much fun out there. The time flew by. Me and the girls had a lot of fun. You've changed a lot lately. What's going on? Nothing's going on, she shrugged. We were on vacation with some friends. Do you know how tired I am of sitting at home? The same thing every day. I want to change. I miss it so much. Okay, take your clothes off. I don't want my son to see you like this. At least let me know if you're going to be late. I'm worried. Okay, I'm going to bed. She waved her hand and disappeared into the bedroom. I don't think you love our son. Ethan reprimanded her as she lay in bed. You were doing something with the little one, but now you don't pay any attention to him, and he's bored. Don't make it up. In a sleepy voice, Olivia assured him. Just because I don't coddle him doesn't mean I don't love him. He needs a stern man's upbringing. I can see he's bothering you. What has he ever done to you? You never kiss him. You never caress him. You just yell at him, and he's so attracted to you. What's wrong with you? You were a great mom, weren't you? Leave me alone. The woman waved me away irritably. I'm tired. I want to sleep. How many times can you teach me? I know how to behave with my son. I don't need your advice. A week later, Ethan received a message that made him furious. Who's that? He shoved the phone under his wife's nose. Who's the guy in the picture next to you? Just a guy I know. She replied nonchalantly. Why are you freaking out? Why are you freaking out? I find out that my wife is cheating on me, and you pretend that nothing happened. What do you think? A light flirtation, no binding relationship. I thought I'd diversify our relationship a little bit. Are you crazy? What's wrong with you? I go out of my way to provide for you and Hunter, and you're in bed with another man. Aren't you ashamed in front of your son? What's wrong with me? You're one to talk. Olivia snorted contemptuously. Have you forgotten how you slept with your Kathy? I was pregnant then. Forget? I'll remind you. What, you don't like it? Feel how much it hurt. Did you think I wouldn't find out? You. Ethan turned pale. From where? Some kind people found her. Her mother called me and told me that you got Kathy pregnant, too. And now you're claiming me. Fuck you. She's locked herself in the bedroom. Olivia, it was one time. On homecoming day. I was drunk. I don't remember how it happened. I've forgotten all about it. But I remember everything, shouted the woman. I'll never forget. You cheated on me. You didn't even have the courage to admit it. Confessed to nothing. Ethan said in despair. That night meant nothing to me. You mean you had no feelings for her? Are you an animal? Just looking for someone to sleep with? God, you can't understand. I had nothing with her. Just that night. I've only had one night with this guy. What? Did I hurt your feelings? Oh yeah, you know, hurt a man's ego. Why are you taking revenge on me now, after all these years? Isn't it a little late? It's fine. You can humiliate me, curse me, but what about my son? Why are you punishing him with indifference? Or are you taking revenge for being mine? Don't twist things around. He has nothing to do with it. Lying in bed, Olivia thought back to the day she found out about her husband's infidelity. Why are you telling me all this? Ethan couldn't cheat on me. He loves me. But the conversation was interrupted by a short beep. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. He's not like that. We're about to have a baby. A sharp pain in her lower abdomen made the woman bend. A trickle of blood trickled down her legs. Daddy. With trembling hands, she dialed her father's number. Daddy. She cried into the receiver Benjamin. Come to me urgently, my baby, my baby. I'm afraid, Daddy. I feel so bad. Don't cry, daughter. I'll be right there. Just don't hang up. I'll call the hospital. They'll come to you right away. Father ran down the corridor, followed by the doctors, and on the gurney lay pale Olivia with an IV in her hand. Dad, are they gonna save my baby? Will they? It's gonna be okay. Don't worry, sweetheart. This clinic has the best doctors in the world. I can't lose him, do you understand? I need him, this baby. You won't lose him, Benjamin assured me. No miracle happened, and the doctor's verdict was still in my ears. Olivia, girl, there was nothing we could do. We had to terminate the pregnancy. You were in danger. You had lost a lot of blood. The baby, with such blood loss, was doomed. Olivia, my daughter. Benjamin looked anxiously at his daughter. Don't kill yourself. They were saving you. And what to do? I dreamed so much about this child, and now I have to wait again to get pregnant. What am I gonna tell Ethan? Ethan's a smart man. He'll figure it out. I'm sorry, but I have to tell you that you can never be a mother. I'm telling you this now so you don't have any illusions. Daddy, how's that? Why? A lot of women have abortions, they miscarry, and then they're pregnant again. Am I any worse? But not in your case, you were too far along. Don't worry, the doctor says you can always take a little one from an orphanage or go to a surrogate. There are so many options today. Are you out of your mind? I want my baby, okay? Mine. What am I gonna tell my husband? What's a family without children? She grabbed the doctor's arm. I'm begging you. Ethan mustn't know I've lost a child. Daddy, don't let anyone dare say I've lost him, or I'll. She collapsed on the pillow and sobbed. Daughter, don't even think about dying. We still have to tell your husband about the miscarriage. He has to know the truth. No, don't you dare, or I won't be able to take care of myself. You have to realize we can't keep this from him much longer. Not now, please. While he's away on business, I'll tell you when he gets back. Dad, do something. I'm begging you. Your daughter's family is on the verge of disaster. What is there to do? I'd give anything to make you happy, but there's nothing money can do. Olivia couldn't stay in the ward. She went to the hospital park, sat on a bench and cried. Woman, can I help you? Someone's hand rested on the woman's shoulders, shuddering with sobs. She raised her head. Olivia? What's wrong? What happened? She jumped up, shoved her fist painfully into Daniel's chest. It was him. It's your wife's fault. You snake. I lost my baby because of her. I hate her. I don't see what Kathy has to do with this. Sit down and tell me. Calm down. How can I calm down? Her mom called and told me that Kathy's having Ethan's baby. And you didn't know. I knew. Kathy told me right away. And you forgave her? Married her knowing she was pregnant with another man's child. Of course I love her. I had to accept her as she was. And I was stupid to be happy that he loved me. I didn't even look at the others. I was faithful. But she cried again. We had a good night out. I don't get it, Kathy. When her mother, Wendy, called, I had a miscarriage. I was pregnant, too, with my husband's baby, not another man's. And now I'm never gonna have kids. Why would Ethan want me childless? He'll leave me the first chance he gets. Kathy, you ruined our family. What are you doing? Getting all hot and bothered? Your Ethan won't leave you. If he wanted to, he'd have left a long time ago. How many opportunities have there been? And Kathy hasn't given you any reason not to trust her. Aren't you afraid he'll turn on her? He's gonna find out she's carrying his baby sooner or later. Do you think Kathy would stay with you if he beckoned her? I doubt it. We'd both be fools. What am I supposed to do? Drown myself? Why should I live without him? Wait for drowning. Daniel thought for a moment. There must be a way out. There is. Olivia lowered her voice to a whisper, looking around. We can switch the baby. I don't care whose baby it is, as long as my husband doesn't find out he's not the father. I've got it all figured out. What's the time difference with Kathy? I don't know, a month or two. What's it to you? What was it supposed to be? A son? Why are you giving me riddles? You see, I don't like raising someone else's child. It'll always remind me of the affair. And you said you forgive me. Olivia grinned. Do not cling to the words. I dream of my own. If you are ready for a switch, how would we arrange that Kathy child, she is also waiting for a son, became yours? Let's restore some justice, so to speak. Let the boy be brought up by his father. He doesn't even know about him. I'm willing to sign any papers to keep the whole story quiet. And what do you want for that? Olivia wiped away her tears. Nothing. Just to get rid of the baby. If it works out, everybody wins. You get the baby and I get rid of him without blood and tears. The father gets his son. Only your wife will lose. Olivia grinned evilly. Serves her right. Don't hang on other men's husbands. She took my son, and I'll take her. In a year's time, she'll get pregnant again and have my child, and everyone will be happy. And make sure I never see or hear from you or your husband again. And in fact, let's pretend we don't know each other. You don't have to worry about that. The only thing is, how do we do this discreetly? We'll need a doctor's help, but I don't think any of them would agree to a forgery. Don't worry. The woman's got her spirits back up. The doctor I had my baby with is a friend of my father's. We'll arrange for Kathy to go to him for the delivery. He'll do everything before anyone knows I've lost the baby. I'll pretend I'm still pregnant. My dad will arrange for me to stay at the clinic. It's easier to hide the loss of the baby. You'll let me know when you're due, and the rest will be up to the doctor. Are you sure? We won't get burned. You guarantee it. Can you trust him? He'll do anything for me, and if he doesn't want me, I'll get my dad involved. So, are you ready to write a waiver right now? I can't wait to see our contract signed. Let's do it this way. I'm actually waiting for my wife to come home from counseling. I'll take her home and call you, and in the meantime, you find out what's going on. If the doctor doesn't agree, then it's not worth it. I don't want to risk it. Kathy won't forgive me if he finds out what we're up to. Don't worry, no one will find out. They went their separate ways, and 2 hours later, they were sitting in the Chief of Staff's office. Daniel, do you realize what you're setting me up for? The doctor was horrified by Olivia and Daniel's plan. If any information leaks out, I'll go to jail. It's a crime. It's a crime to make me childless. The woman said, "It's okay. We'll grow up. He'll be no worse than anyone else. He will not go to a foreign family, but to his own father." Don't you feel sorry for Kathy? She's been dying to lose a child for a while. Think of what she's going through. Was she sorry when she was screwing my husband? I guess she didn't realize she was hurting me. It's okay. Let her feel what it's like to lose a child. Do you have any idea what would happen if the forgery came out? We'd all go to jail. If you don't tell us, no one will ever hear from us. Daniel, are you sure you're ready to give up your unborn child? You bet I am. I don't want a living reminder of my wife's infidelity. I dream of my hair, and I'm determined. Don't you feel sorry for your wife? She'll cry, she'll cry, she'll stop crying. I'll do my best to make Kathy forget about the child as soon as possible. Think about it. You're saving 2 families from destruction. Yeah, but at what cost? Taking a mother's son away from her? That's inhumane. I don't know. I'm not ready to take that step. It will be your fault if Ethan leaves me. Olivia screamed hysterically, and he'll leave me when he finds out I can't bear him in hair. For my father's sake, for the sake of your friendship, help me. I want to be happy too. Does Benjamin know what you're up to? Naturally, and he supports me in everything I do. His daughter's happiness is more important to him than anything else in the world. Mind you, your risks will be generously paid for. All right, the doctor has given up. But swear you won't back down at the last minute and keep it a secret. I don't want to lose my job. You don't have to worry about that. We both have a vested interest in silence. Where are we going to get proof that the baby died? I'll take care of the death certificate, but you'll have to bury the baby in the cemetery. I'll take care of that. Daniel looked seriously at Olivia. An inconsolable mother should be able to say goodbye to her son. Everything should look natural. I can't imagine what Kathy will do to you if she finds out the truth. The doctor said thoughtfully, "You are a frightful man. She will not find out the truth. I protect the interests of my family. Shall we make a deal?" Daniel extended his hand to the doctor, who shook it. Olivia was satisfied, smiling triumphantly. "Here it is. Pay back for the sin I committed 5 years ago. They say God sees who offends whom, and what a dear price I will have to pay for my deception." The woman thought when she heard the diagnosis. "Olivia, I'm being completely honest with you. Uterine cancer is a scary and insidious disease. Unfortunately, surgery is not an option. Treatment must begin immediately. Is 2 days enough to take care of everything? After that, there will be a long and difficult path of treatment and rehabilitation. You'll be in the hospital for a long time. I'll be fine." On stiff legs, the woman left the office and sat down on a chair in the corridor. Fear squeezed her heart with a merciless hand. It became difficult to breathe, and tears flowed and flowed from her eyes. "A woman?" asked on the way a nurse who ran past. "Do you need any help?" "No, thank you." No one can help me now, she thought. She got up and walked to the exit, dialing a number on the way. "Kathy?" she asked in a shaky voice. "It's Olivia. We need to talk. It's urgent. When can we meet? What do we have to talk to you about?" Kathy was surprised. "I have a confession to make about you and Ethan. Come on tonight after work. Although I don't see what Ethan and I have to do with each other. It's been a while. Don't say no. It's a matter of life and death. I'll call you and tell you where I'll be waiting. There's no forgiveness for me. I must confess what I've done." Olivia said on the way home. "If I'm going to die, I want to get the stone off my soul. Did I think then that the boomerang of fate would catch up with me and I would be so cruelly punished? But how will I tell her that I stole her son? How will I explain that I colluded with her husband?" The woman fumbled around the apartment, not knowing what to hold on to. "No, I can't tell her. I'm afraid to see the hate in her eyes, to hear her curse at me. She won't forgive me anyway, and I don't need her forgiveness. The main thing is to get the boy back to his real mother. What do I do? There must be a way out. Stop!" She stopped abruptly. "I'll write a letter. That's right. I'll write a letter now and give it to her when I see her. I'll ask her to open it when I go to the hospital. That's right, not before. Just a page of handwriting." Olivia grinned bitterly, half an hour later, rereading the letter. "And therein lies my sin and Kathy's happiness. Now I must call Daniel. I will explain everything to him. He'll understand that I can't do otherwise." "Olivia?" Daniel was surprised to hear from her, as they hadn't seen each other since that memorable day. "Did something happen? Didn't we agree to keep our acquaintance private?" "Daniel, I can't keep quiet anymore. I've decided to tell Kathy." "Wait, what do you mean you've decided to tell her?" "We swore we'd keep it quiet." "I'm sorry, circumstances have changed." "What circumstances?" Daniel was furious. "Have you forgotten how I saved you from the loony bin? And now you've decided to dump me? You promised me that Ethan or his little brat would never show up on my horizon again. Everything was fine, and now what? I'm gravely ill. I may not have much time left in this world. I don't want to leave with the guilt of your wife. If you've decided to destroy your family, I won't talk you out of it. But leave us alone. Leave me out of this. I'm not going to repent. You can't stop me. I've written a letter to Kathy and arranged to meet her today. I can't keep the secret any longer. I feel my illness, payback for the crime. Olivia, what are we doing on the phone?" Daniel was on edge. He wanted to strangle Olivia, but he decided to try to talk her down. "Why don't we meet like good old friends? We'll sit in a cafe. I'll buy you a coffee and we'll talk about it. I know you're not yourself right now. We'll think together how to resolve our situation with dignity, so no one gets hurt. Tell me where to meet you. You can't talk me out of this," Olivia said, getting into Daniel's car when he picked her up at her house an hour later. "I've thought it over. Don't you think we should make decisions like this together? Aren't you afraid you'll suffer the same fate? I'm sure the illness is punishment for a mistake I made. Tell me the heavens are angry with you. Don't be ridiculous. Are you really going to tell my wife everything as it is? Your wife and my husband?" "Yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I can't tell her to her face. I wrote a letter." "Is the letter with you?" "With me. You wouldn't believe it, but I felt so much better. I've only just realized what you and I have done. How could I ever think of taking a baby away from its mother? And you, what have you done with your wife's life? I saw her at the cemetery the other day, more beautiful in her coffin. None of your business. Give me the letter, I'll see what you wrote. The truth. Everything as it was. I don't believe you'd do that. Is he bluffing?" What do you want? Money, how much? I have a good business, I can share it. How much is your silence worth today? I'm not interested in money. I'm determined to get my child back to her mother. And here, she waved the letter in front of Daniel's nose. A confession. Give it to me now. He tried to grab the envelope. I won't. And anyway, where are we going? Out of town. You don't want anyone to see us together, remember? We don't know you. Watch the road. Slow down. What's wrong? Did you change your mind about dying? He's speeding up on purpose to tease her. Give me the envelope. Even if you take the envelope from me, I'll still open Kathy's eyes. Let her know what kind of monster she's been living with for so many years. Do you think she'll stay with you after all this? One phone call, one letter, and the myth of a happy family life will fall apart. Oh, you little bitch, are you blackmailing me? Daniel only took his eyes off the road for a moment to snatch the letter from Olivia's hands, but it was his fatal mistake. Hey, the woman screamed, instinctively covering her head with her hands. At breakneck speed, the car flew into the oncoming lane. Daniel tried to turn the steering wheel. The side wheels caught the edge of the asphalt. Gravel burst out from under them. The car was thrown up. A split second later, the car collapsed to the ground. The wheels were still spinning frantically, humming. Get an ambulance, police, firemen. Immediately, a crowd gathered. People tried to pull the injured out of the car lying on the roof. But Olivia and Daniel did not see or hear it. Their bloody bodies were lying on the roadside, waiting for the police to arrive. The terrible accident had happened just a few minutes ago on a country highway. Kathy leaned back tiredly in her chair and almost dozed off, listening to scraps of phrases from the news. According to eyewitnesses, the culprit was the driver of a foreign car who had swerved into the oncoming lane of traffic. Apparently, the speed was too high because the car was thrown into the air. According to preliminary data, there were 2 people in the foreign car, a man and a woman. Both are dead. Their identities are being established. Suddenly, the phone rang. Hello. Shaking off her drowsiness, the woman spoke. Kathy, you need to come over for identification right away. I'm sorry, but according to our information, your husband was killed in a traffic accident. We need to make a positive identification. Wait, you're wrong. The husband should be at work right now. He wasn't going anywhere. We found an ID in your husband's name in the victim's car. Only you can confirm or deny our assumptions. So come on down. There's been some kind of horrible mistake. Kathy stared at the phone in confusion, where short beeps were heard. This can't be true. Daniel is a good driver. What would he be doing on the country highway? Maybe he loaned his car to someone. That would explain the ID. I'll call him now and find out. The woman dialed Daniel's number. The subscriber's phone is switched off or out of range. A mechanical voice said, No, it's not him. Definitely not him. She packed quickly, hailed a cab, and headed for the morgue. Ethan? Kathy was surprised to see her former classmate at the entrance to the dingy gray building. What are you doing here? Probably the same as you. I'm here for the lineup. My wife, she was in your husband's car. How? Do they know each other? I didn't know. Neither did I. Maybe it was an accident. Come on, they're waiting for us. Kathy opened the door with determination. Come in. A stern-looking pathologist was watching the lineup closely. Are you ready? I'm ready. She still couldn't believe that under the white sheet with the license plate on his leg lay her husband, but it was too late to back down. Daniel, she whispered, seeing her husband's pale face. The woman swayed. Ethan supported her under her arm. Now you." The man turned to Ethan and pulled back the sheet. "Yes." In a husky voice, he said, "This is my wife, Olivia. Come with me. I'll give you the dead men's belongings." Both were given small boxes. The man and the woman went outside. "Kathy, are you going home?" "Yes, although, to be honest, I don't want to go back, and the house is huge, and now without Daniel, it's empty. We dreamed of having a big family, but it didn't work out." "Kathy," Ethan stopped. "It's good to see you. I'm sorry we met under such sad circumstances. It was good to see you, too. How long has it been since we've seen each other?" 5 years? "Yes, 5 years." The woman opened the car door. "I'm sorry. I have to go. I should go, too. My son's waiting for me at home. I have to tell him somehow that my mom's gone. You're lucky you have a son, and I have a son." Kathy hurriedly got in her car and drove off. "Kathy?" She stood by the fresh mound of flowers and stared at her husband's portrait, unconcerned. "If you need anything, call me. Don't be shy. Shake her hand, Daniel's friends." "Thank you." Like a robot, the woman responded to condolences. "How young?" The acquaintances shook their heads sympathetically. His business was so strong, so promising, but it just rose and burned down at its peak. Business partners were saddened. Heaven takes the best, and your husband, Kathy, was a reliable man. She longed to be left alone to think in silence about her life. Unnoticeably in the troubles of organizing the funeral, wake, registration of documents, 40 days passed. Kathy thought with horror how she would survive the necessity to gather again all these unfamiliar and completely unknown people who would again say something about her husband. She didn't want to see anyone. Why all the speeches, the wake, if the man was gone? She asked Lisa. It was the custom. She shrugged her shoulders. The question I'm most interested in is how Olivia ended up in the same car as my husband. I don't think we'll ever know. She asked me to meet her. Kathy suddenly remembered. I wonder what she wanted to tell me. The woman hardly waited until the end of the dinner, respecting the propriety, said goodbye to everyone, thanking them for their sympathy for her grief. She gave orders to the waiters and hurried home. Kathy, a representative man in a strict business suit approached her. May I give you a ride home? I'd appreciate it. She said yes and got into a brand new black Jeep. Kathy realized that this gentleman had something serious to say to her. Otherwise, he would not have offered to help her. What do you want from me? She asked directly. Your husband has a huge business, and you are the sole heir to his fortune. Why should a fragile woman take on the headache? Besides, as far as I know, you've never taken any interest in your husband's business. Is there anything in particular you'd like to offer me? I'd like to buy your business and give you a quiet life and keep you out of danger. What makes you think I'm in any danger? Because, fair lady, your husband's business is a tidbit for all those who have assured you today of their readiness to help you if you have any difficulty. Why should I believe you? You have no other choice. I have no reason to deceive you. I'll give you a good price. Not at a loss, I admit, but I'll buy your whole business so you don't have to sell it off piecemeal. If you turn me down, your husband's former partners will swoop in and start tearing your business apart, and everyone will try to get their hands on you, and believe me, you won't be able to resist them. What if I don't want to sell? Then they'll use some less than legal methods. You know what I'm talking about. Kathy went cold when she realized what I was saying. And none of them will discount the fact that you just lost your husband. They don't give a damn about you. Nothing personal, just business. They're bargain hunters. They're used to making a profit. Had I convinced you? I can expect to be able to buy your husband's business in 6 months when you inherit it. To be honest, I decided to sell everything at once. Kathy said, looking out the car window. Raindrops slowly dripped down the window. Nature mourned with her for her husband, her failed family life, the loneliness that already had an iron grip on her. I want to get away from here. It's hard to come to a house where we were happy in our own way with my husband. I hope I can make a fresh start. That's great. Stopping in front of the house, the man said, "Then I'll contact you myself or send my lawyer." Kathy entered the house. She was stunned by the ringing silence. To break it, the woman turned on some music, undressed, and got into bed. No more souring. She said to herself in the morning, "It is time to put the house in order. It is necessary to collect her husband's things and give them to some social service. What if someone could use them?" She had a quick breakfast and started cleaning. Going through the papers in her husband's study, she came across a box that had been given to her after Daniel's death. "I wonder what's in there," she said, lifting the lid. A watch, the face broken. "I gave it to him last year. Wallet, bank cards, money, everything is there. What's this envelope?" She twirled it in her hands in surprise, a white mailing envelope with no address, blood caked on one side. Who was it intended for, this unsent letter? Kathy cut open the envelope with a paper knife and pulled out a triple-folded piece of paper. "Kathy," she read it. "Strange, a letter for me? But from whom?" She glanced at the signature. "Olivia? Kathy, I didn't have the heart to tell you to your face that I'm a vile creature. I ruined your life. Now I'm trying to make some kind of excuse to you, even though I realize I'm unforgivable. 5 years ago, I robbed you of your son. I know how crazy I sound, but I was driven by revenge at the time. I couldn't forgive you for sleeping with my husband. I lost my child. I was sure Ethan wouldn't stay with me. He wanted an heir. I couldn't give it to my husband anymore. The doctors diagnosed infertility. And then we met Daniel. He didn't want to put up with your infidelity either, even though he assured you otherwise. Somehow we agreed to have your son registered in my name. At that time I thought I was doing everything right, protecting my family, but one day you have to pay for your mistakes. I'm very sick right now. I don't know if I can make it. But in the eyes of God, I'm gonna try to make it right. I know Ethan won't forgive me. I've done too much wrong. At least try to understand me now. I've been a good mother, but I haven't been able to forget who son Hunter really is. He's yours and Ethan's. Forgive me if you can, and try to be happy. I sincerely wish it for you. Olivia." "Hunter? My boy's name is Hunter?" Kathy rushed like crazy to get dressed. "I'm going to see him at once. I don't know how that's possible." She dropped everything and went to Ethan's. "You?" He exhaled when he saw her on the doorstep. "I wasn't expecting that, but I'm glad. Come in. I really wasn't expecting guests today. I didn't come to visit." Kathy, worried, entered the living room. "I brought a letter to read, your wife's confession." She handed him a letter. "Read it, and then we'll have to decide what to do about it." This. The man was speechless when he read the letter. "Are you sure it's the truth? Would a man who might be on death's doorstep lie to himself? That's why your wife was in Daniel's car. I wouldn't give Olivia's confession so much credence. Yes, she's changed lately. Yeah, she's been cold to Nate. But how did they set it up? I think Olivia's father had something to do with it. I don't think they'd do the forgery without Benjamin's support. Benjamin won't be able to find out anything. He had a stroke right after Olivia's funeral. What are you suggesting? I want to see my son. Wait, I'm not gonna let you traumatize his psyche. He just lost his mother, and you show up. In fact, I need proof that you're his mother. A letter written by Olivia in some obscure state of mind is not proof. You want me to take a DNA test? I'll do it. Immediately. I have nothing to hide. I want to prove that Hunter is my son. They immediately went to the clinic, took the tests. Kathy couldn't bear to wait for the results. A few days later, they met again. Kathy, I congratulate you. The probability that you are Hunter's mother is over 99%. Ethan stood there like a thunderstruck man. Kathy broke into a smile. I knew it. I felt it was my boy. You can't fool a mother's heart. I felt him the day your mother showed me his picture. I recognized my features in him, but it seemed wild to me then. They left the clinic together. Shall we go to the cafe? Ethan suggested. We have a lot to talk about. What are we going to do? I want to raise my son. It'll be hard for you to handle him. You're a man. I want to feel like a real mother. You can't deny me that. I hope we can work this out between us without lawyers. I have to think this through. I have to do the paperwork. What's to think about? I just want to see my son. You can't deny me that, can you? No, not today. My head's still a mess myself. I have to talk to him, explain it to him somehow. Here's what we'll do. Tomorrow we'll meet at my house. You'll talk to him. You don't know if he'll be able to take you in. All right. Kathy agreed, though she wanted to hug her son with all her heart, but she realized Ethan's reasoning was correct. I'm sure Hunter will accept me, not right away, of course, but at least I'll be near him. The next day, the woman bought a huge, soft teddy bear and went to visit. Come in. Ethan stepped aside, letting her into the house. We're waiting for you. Hello, little one. Kathy looked at the exact replica of Ethan. Curls of hair just like hers were neatly combed. The boy eyed his unfamiliar aunt warily. She held out the bear to him and smiled broadly. The little boy smiled back and accepted the toy. Kathy did not make an attempt to hug him, afraid to scare him. She decided not to rush things. You're doing great. Ethan praised her. I was afraid that you wouldn't stand up to him and rush to hug him. He invited her to the table, their son playing nearby. After a while, the child sat freely on Kathy's lap, and she stroked his hair fondly and inhaled the unique scent of childhood. I should probably go, the woman said hesitantly. The baby needs to go to bed too. Will you come again? Hunter asked hopefully, looking at his mother with brown eyes. Do you want her to stay with us forever? Unexpectedly, Ethan blurted out. The boy jumped up, clapped his hands, and then hugged Kathy's legs. She picked the child up, held him to her, kissed him, and cried. Why are you crying? Smiling, Ethan asked. Go put your son to bed. I'll set the table. 15 minutes later, the woman returned, a happy smile wandering on her face. He fell asleep, she said. I had to remember the fairy tales I read as a child. He's very curious. That's what your mother used to say.